My name is Sarah. I am 34 years old, and I work as the head nurse in a high-volume emergency room in Chicago. I spend my days saving strangers holding hands through trauma and making split-second decisions that determine who lives and who dies. But 3 weeks ago, when I was the one lying on the gurney, the people I had spent my entire life saving decided to let me drown. My parents refused to pick up my 3-year-old twins while I was being wheeled into emergency surgery because they had VIP tickets to see Taylor Swift with my younger sister. They actually told me I was being a nuisance and a burden for ruining their big night. So I did the only thing a mother could do. I hired a stranger to watch my children from my hospital bed, and then I picked up my phone and canceled every single credit card mortgage payment and insurance policy I had been funding for my family for the last decade. 3 weeks later, there was a frantic knock on my door, but by then, the daughter they knew was gone. Before I tell you exactly how I served them the ultimate eviction notice, please hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever been the family bank but treated like the family mistake. Drop a comment below telling me where you are watching from. I love reading your stories. Now let me take you back to that Tuesday afternoon when my world collapsed. It started as a dull ache in my lower abdomen, something I tried to ignore during my shift. As a nurse, we are the worst patients. We push through. We tell ourselves it is just stress or dehydration. But by 2 p.m., the dull ache had turned into a searing, white-hot knife twisting inside me. I collapsed right there in the hallway of Trauma Room 4. My colleagues, people I joke with every day, suddenly had terror in their eyes as they lifted me onto a stretcher. The diagnosis was immediate and terrifying. A ruptured ovarian cyst with significant internal bleeding. I needed surgery, and I needed it immediately. Through the haze of pain and the morphine they were pushing into my IV, my first thought was not about my life. It was about Noah and Mia. My sweet 3-year-old twins were at daycare and pickup time was in 2 hours. I am a single mother. Their father is not in the picture. I am their whole world, and they are mine. Lying there watching the fluorescent lights blur above me, I felt a surge of panic that cut deeper than the surgical steel waiting for me. I needed to call my emergency contacts. I needed my family. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely unlock my phone. I dialed my mother, Linda. In my mind, despite our strained relationship, I thought this was the moment that mattered. Surely petty arguments and my sister's drama would be put aside for a life-or-death situation. I am the responsible one. I am the one who makes sure everything runs smoothly. For the past 10 years, I have been the invisible glue holding the family together. As the phone rang, I thought about the house my parents live in. It is a beautiful 2-story home in the suburbs that they love to show off to their friends at the country club. They tell everyone my father David made wise investments. The truth is, I pay the mortgage. Every single month, $2,500 leaves my account to keep a roof over their heads, because Dad gambled away his retirement fund years ago. I thought about my younger sister Tiffany, who drives a brand new BMW to her part-time job as a yoga instructor. I pay the lease on that car too because my mother said Tiffany needed reliable transportation to find herself. I have spent my entire adult life being their safety net. I worked double shifts, missed holidays, and sacrificed my own comfort to make sure they never felt the consequences of their poor financial decisions. I convinced myself that this was love. I told myself that because I was the strong one, it was my duty to carry them. So as the phone rang and rang, I truly believed that they would answer. I believed that for once, when I was the one who was broken and bleeding, they would step up. I needed them to drive 20 minutes to the daycare, pick up Noah and Mia, and give them dinner until I woke up from anesthesia. It was a small ask. It was the bare minimum. Finally, the call connected. I could hear loud music and laughter in the background. My mother's voice was sharp, annoyed, like I had interrupted something important. "Sarah, what is it?" she snapped. "We are just pulling into the stadium parking lot. The signal is terrible." I swallowed the bile rising in my throat and tried to keep my voice steady. "Mom, I am at the hospital. My cyst ruptured. I am going into emergency surgery right now. I need you to get the twins. There was a pause. I expected a gasp. I expected concern. I expected her to ask which hospital. Instead, I heard my sister Tiffany in the background whining. Mom, tell her to hurry up. We're going to miss the opening set. Then my mother sighed a long, exasperated sound that I had heard 1,000 times in my childhood. Sarah, are you serious right now? You are always so dramatic. It is just a cyst. Take some Tylenol. We have been planning this Taylor Swift concert for a year. Tiffany is wearing a custom outfit. We cannot just turn around because you have a stomach ache. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and stinging. Mom, please, I begged, my voice cracking. This is not a stomach ache. I am bleeding internally. If I do not have this surgery, I could die. Who is going to watch Noah and Mia? I heard my father's voice, then muffled but distinct. Is she trying to ruin this night too? Tell her to figure it out. She is a grown woman. My mother came back on the line, her voice cold and final. You heard your father. You are always such a nuisance, Sarah. Always bringing your problems to us when we are trying to enjoy our lives. You are a burden. Call a babysitter. Do not call us again tonight. We are turning our phones off. The line went dead. I stared at the screen, the words nuisance and burden echoing in my mind louder than the hospital alarms. The pain in my body was excruciating, but the pain in my chest was unbearable. I had paid for the very tickets they were using. I had paid for the data plan they used to check the concert set list. I had paid for the gas in the car that drove them there. And they left me. They left me to face surgery alone, and worse, they left my children stranded. A nurse touched my shoulder gently. Sarah, we need to take you back now. I looked at her, and in that moment, the daughter who sought approval died. The sister who enabled laziness died. The woman who bought love with mortgage payments died. I wiped my eyes and asked for 5 more minutes. I had one more call to make, and it wasn't to family. It was to a high-end nanny agency that charged $50 an hour for emergency overnight care. I gave them my credit card number with a shaking hand. I secured care for my children. And then as they wheeled me into the operating room, I made a vow. If I survived this surgery, my parents would realize that the burden they hated so much was actually the pillar holding up their entire fake life. And I was about to kick that pillar down. The phone felt like a lead weight in my hand, heavy and cold against my clammy palm. The nurse had stepped out for just a moment to grab the consent forms for the surgery, leaving me alone in the small curtained bay of the emergency room. The pain in my abdomen was no longer coming in waves. It was a constant screaming presence, a white-hot fire that made it difficult to draw a full breath. But even through that haze of physical agony, the terror of my children sitting alone at daycare was sharper. I stared at the contact name on my screen. Mom. It was just 3 letters, but they carried a lifetime of baggage. Calling her felt like admitting defeat. It felt like walking back into a cage I had spent my entire adult life trying to escape. But I had no choice. I was a single mother about to go under anesthesia. There was no husband to call. There were no in-laws. There was just me and the family I had been supporting for a decade. My thumb hovered over the call button. A memory flashed through my mind of the last time I asked my mother for help. It was 5 years ago when I had the flu. I asked her to drop off some soup. She told me gas was too expensive to drive across town for a sniffle. I transferred her $50 for gas. She never came. But this was different. This wasn't the flu. This was life-threatening surgery. Surely seeing her daughter in a hospital bed would override her selfishness. Surely the grandmother in her would wake up for the sake of Noah and Mia. I pressed the button. The line rang. 1 ring. 2 rings. My heart hammered against my ribs, keeping a frantic tempo with the beeping monitor beside me. Please pick up, I whispered to the empty room. Please, just be a mom today. Just for today. 3 rings. 4 rings. I was about to hang up, convinced they were ignoring me, when the call connected. The sound that greeted me was not a hello. It was a wall of noise. Screaming crowds, thumping bass, and the distorted echo of a stadium announcer. What my mother's voice barked through the speaker. She sounded irritated, like I was a telemarketer interrupting dinner. "Sarah, I cannot hear a thing. Why are you calling me right now? You know where we are." I winced, holding the phone away from my ear as a wave of nausea rolled over me. I tried to speak, but my voice came out as a raspy croak. "Mom," I said, forcing the words past the dryness in my throat. "Mom, please listen. I am at St. Mary's Hospital." What she shouted over the noise. "Speak up, Sarah. God, you are always mumbling." I took a shallow, ragged breath. "I am at the hospital, Mom." I almost shouted it, causing a sharp stab of pain in my side that made me double over. "I have a ruptured ovarian cyst. I am bleeding internally. They are taking me into surgery in 20 minutes. There was a brief pause on the other end, but the background noise didn't stop. The cheering continued. The music swelled. I waited for the gasp. I waited for the panic. I waited for her to ask if I was going to be okay. Instead, she sighed. A long, loud, dramatic sigh that I could hear clearly, even over the stadium noise. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Sarah. A cyst. You are calling me in the middle of the opening act to tell me you have a cyst. Do you have any idea how much these tickets cost?" The air in the room seemed to vanish. I gripped the sheets with my free hand, my knuckles turning white. "Mom, did you hear me? It ruptured. I need surgery. I cannot pick up the twins. You need to go get Noah and Mia from daycare. They close in an hour." I heard her say something away from the phone, probably to my father or Tiffany. Then she came back on the line, her voice dripping with venom. "We are not leaving Sarah. We just got here. Tiffany has been talking about this concert for 8 months. Do you know how hard it was to get these seats? We are in a VIP box. We are not going to drive all the way back to the city to play babysitter because you have a stomachache." "It is not a stomachache," I sobbed, the tears finally spilling over. "I am scared, Mom. I am all alone here. And I do not know when I will wake up. Please, the kids do not know anyone else." "Listen to me," she hissed, her voice dropping to that cold, dangerous register she used when I was a child and had forgotten to do my chores. "Stop being so selfish. This is your sister's night. Look at what you are doing. You are ruining the vibe. You always do this. You always have to make everything about you and your drama. My drama." The words hit me harder than the diagnosis had. I thought about the drama of paying off their credit card debt 3 times. I thought about the drama of buying them new appliances when theirs broke. I thought about the drama of funding their lifestyle while I wore scrubs and drove a 6-year-old sedan. "Mom, I am begging you," I whispered, my spirit breaking. "I have nobody else." "That is your fault, isn't it?" she shot back. "If you weren't so difficult, maybe you would have a husband to handle this. But no, you have to call us. You have to drag us down. You know what you are, Sarah. You are a nuisance." The word hung in the air between us, suspended over the miles of telephone wire. Nuisance. "I am sick of it," she continued, emboldened by her own cruelty. "You are a burden on this family. We are finally trying to have one night of joy, one night to celebrate Tiffany, and here you are demanding we drop everything for you. Well, I am not doing it. I am not leaving this stadium. Figure it out yourself. Call a neighbor. Call a taxi. I do not care. Just stop calling us." "Mom, wait," I cried out, panic seizing my chest as I realized she was really going to leave me there. "Do not call us again tonight," she yelled. "I am turning my phone off. We are going to enjoy this concert, and we are going to forget you exist for a few hours. Grow up, Sarah." And then the line went dead. I stared at the black screen of my phone. The call had lasted less than 2 minutes. In less than 120 seconds, the woman who gave birth to me had confirmed what I had always suspected, but was too afraid to admit. I did not matter to her. My life did not matter. My children did not matter. The only thing that mattered was her pleasure, her image, and my sister. Slowly, I lowered the phone to my lap. The pain in my abdomen was still there, fierce and biting, but it felt distant now. It was overshadowed by a profound hollow ache in the center of my chest. A nuisance. A burden. Those words replayed in my mind on an endless loop. I closed my eyes and saw the bank transfers I sent on the first of every month. $2,500 for their mortgage, $400 for their car insurance, $600 for their health insurance premiums. I added it up in my head. Over 10 years, I had given them nearly $500,000. I had worked overtime, picked up holiday shifts, and missed my children's milestones to make sure my parents lived in comfort. I had denied myself vacations so they could go to Florida. I had shopped at discount stores so they could wear designer labels. I was not a nuisance. I was their lifeline. I was the only reason they weren't living in a one-bedroom apartment living off Social Security checks. I was the reason they could afford VIP Taylor Swift tickets in the first place. A cold, hard realization settled over me, chilling me deeper than the hospital air conditioning. They didn't love me. They loved my utility. They loved what I could do for them. They loved the safety I provided. But the moment the ATM broke, the moment the servant needed to be served, I was discarded. My hands started to shake, not from fear this time, but from a rage so pure and hot, it felt like it could cauterize my internal bleeding. I had spent my life trying to buy their love with loyalty and financial support. I thought if I just gave enough, if I was just good enough, eventually they would see me. Eventually I would be worth staying for. But I wasn't. To them, I was just an obstacle between them and a pop concert. The nurse walked back in holding a clipboard. "Sarah," she said softly, seeing the tears streaming down my face. "Honey, are you okay? Is someone coming for the kids?" I looked up at her. She was a stranger. I didn't know her last name. I didn't know her story. But in her eyes, I saw more compassion in 5 seconds than I had seen in my mother's eyes in 34 years. "No." I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "No one is coming. My family is unavailable." The nurse looked heartbroken for me, but I shook my head. I didn't want pity. I was done with pity. I was done with begging. "Hand me my purse, please," I said, sitting up slightly despite the agony. "Honey, you need to rest," the nurse said. "I will rest when I am under anesthesia," I said, my voice hardening into steel. "Right now, I have business to handle." She handed me my bag. I pulled out my wallet and retrieved my credit card. My hands were no longer shaking. The hysteria was gone, replaced by a clarity that was terrifyingly absolute. "I am going to hire a professional service for my children," I told the nurse, "and then I am going to make sure that when my mother tries to buy a t-shirt at that concert, her card is declined." The nurse's eyes widened, but a small knowing smile touched her lips. She nodded. "You do what you have to do, honey." I looked at the phone one last time. The screen was dark. My mother had turned her phone off just like she promised. She thought she was silencing a nuisance. She didn't realize she was silencing her bank account. She thought she was cutting me off to enjoy a concert. She didn't realize she had just cut herself off from the only person who gave a damn about her survival. Nuisance. Burden. "Okay, Mom," I whispered to the empty air. "You want to see what a burden looks like. Wait until you see how heavy life gets when you have to carry it yourself." I unlocked my phone and dialed the number for the nanny agency. As it rang, I didn't cry. The tears were for the daughter who died the moment that call ended. The woman who remained was someone entirely new, and she was done paying for tickets to a show she wasn't even invited to. The silence that followed the end of the call with my mother was heavier than the lead apron they use in radiology. My phone sat on my chest, a black rectangle that had just delivered the final verdict on my place in the family hierarchy. I wiped the tears from my cheeks with the back of my hand. The IV in my arm tugged painfully, a sharp reminder that I did not have the luxury of breaking down. Not yet. I was a mother first and a patient second. My body was failing, but my mind had to remain steel. I closed my eyes for 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, I visualized Noah and Mia sitting on the colorful rug at their daycare waiting for a grandmother who was never coming. I saw the clock ticking toward 5:30. I saw the daycare workers checking their watches. I took a ragged breath that tasted like antiseptic and fear. Then I opened my eyes. The crying stopped. The panic was shoved into a box in the back of my mind. It was time to execute Plan B. I unlocked my phone again and navigated to a contact I had saved years ago but never thought I would use. Elite Care Concierge. They were a high-end agency in downtown Chicago known for serving celebrities and executives who needed discretion and immediate service. They were exorbitant. They were elitist. And they were the only people who would answer a call at 4 in the afternoon and have a vetted professional at a daycare center within 45 minutes. My finger hovered over the dial button. I knew the rates. I knew this phone call alone would cost more than my car payment. But I also knew that my parents were currently buying merchandise at a stadium with money I had transferred to them last week. The irony burned in my throat like acid. I pressed call. Elite Care Concierge. How may we assist you? A smooth professional voice answered on the first ring. I need an emergency dispatch, I said. My voice was surprisingly steady, stripped of the emotion that had just wrecked me. I am a single mother currently being prepped for emergency surgery at St. Mary's. I have 3-year-old twins at Little Acorns Daycare on 4th Street. I need a pickup and overnight care. Immediately. There was the sound of typing on the other end. I can arrange that, ma'am. However, for a dispatch with less than 2 hours' notice, we have to apply the crisis surcharge. The rate is $150 an hour with a 24-hour minimum commitment. I did the math in my head. That was $3,600. It was a staggering amount of money. It was my emergency fund. It was the money I had been saving to replace the windows in my parents' house next spring. I looked at the ceiling tiles, counting the little dots to keep from screaming. $3,600 to do the job my mother refused to do for free. Do it, I said. I do not care about the cost. Just get them safe. I need a credit card on file to secure the booking, the agent said. I recited the numbers from memory. It was the same Visa card I had given my sister last month to book her flight to Miami. It was the same card that paid for my father's golf clubs. As I spoke the expiration date and the security code, I felt a strange sensation. It wasn't regret. It was a release. For the first time in 10 years, this credit limit was being used to protect the people who actually mattered. It was being used for my children, not to prop up the fragile egos of adults who abandoned me. The transaction is approved, the agent confirmed. We have sent a profile of your nanny, Elena. She is a pediatric nurse practitioner who does this on her days off. She is en route and will be at the daycare in 30 minutes. We will send you a photo confirmation when the children are in her car. Thank you, I whispered, and dropped the phone onto the bed. Just as the line disconnected, the curtain whipped back. A tall man in surgical scrubs stepped in, followed by the anesthesiologist. It was Dr. Henderson, one of the best trauma surgeons in the state. I knew him. I had assisted him in countless surgeries. But today he wasn't my colleague. He was the man holding my life in his hands. Sarah. He said, his voice kind but urgent. Your labs are back. Your white count is through the roof, and your pressure is dropping. We cannot wait any longer. We need to get you upstairs now. I nodded, the room starting to spin slightly as the pain spiked again. We need to go over the consent forms, the anesthesiologist said, stepping forward with a clipboard. Do you have a family member here to sign for you, or are you able to sign for yourself? The question hung in the air, thick and suffocating. A family member. In any other universe, my mother would be sitting in that chair in the corner, holding my purse, looking worried. My father would be pacing the hallway. My sister would be texting updates to the rest of the relatives. But the chair was empty. The hallway was silent. The only thing in the room with me was the ghost of the family I thought I had. I am alone, I said. The words tasted like ash, but they also tasted like truth. I will sign. He handed me the clipboard and a pen. My hand shook as I brought the tip of the pen to the paper. I looked at the line that said emergency contact. It was blank. For a second, I thought about writing my mother's name. It was a reflex. It was a habit ingrained in me since birth. You honor your parents. You rely on your parents. You protect your parents. But then I heard her voice in my head again. You are a nuisance. I gripped the pen harder. I did not write her name. I wrote the number for the Elite Care Concierge Service. If I died on that table, the high-priced nanny service would know what to do with my children better than my own blood relatives would. I moved the pen down to the signature line. Patient signature. As I signed my name, Sarah Evans, I felt something snap inside my chest. It wasn't the cyst. It was the final tether that bound me to the role of the good daughter. The dutiful child who always said yes. The doormat who apologized for taking up space. That Sarah Evans died the moment the ink hit the paper. The woman who was about to go into that operating room was someone else entirely. She was a woman who had just paid $3,600 to strangers because her family chose a pop star over her life. She was a woman who realized that being alone was safer than being with people who drained you dry. I handed the clipboard back to the doctor. Okay, Sarah, Dr. Henderson said, unlocking the wheels of the gurney. We are moving out. We are going to take good care of you. As they pushed me into the hallway, the fluorescent lights flashed overhead in a rhythmic blur. I felt the first wave of the sedative they had pushed into my IV. My limbs felt heavy. The pain began to drift away, replaced by a floating sensation. I looked at my phone one last time before the nurse tucked it into my bag. A notification popped up on the screen. It was from the nanny agency. A photo of Noah and Mia buckled safely into a luxury SUV, holding juice boxes and smiling at the camera. They were safe. I had saved them. I had done it without my mother. I had done it without my father. As the double doors of the operating room swung open, greeting me with the blast of sterile cold air, I closed my eyes. I was about to go under the knife. They were going to cut me open and remove the part of me that was rotting and killing me from the inside. And as the anesthesia mask was placed over my face and the darkness began to creep in at the edges of my vision, I made a promise to the universe. Take the cyst, I thought, as my consciousness faded. Take the infection. Take the blood. But take the guilt, too. When I wake up, I'm going to be lighter. I am going to be scar tissue and steel. And God help anyone who tries to treat me like a burden ever again. The last thing I heard was the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor, steady and strong. It was the sound of my own heart beating for me, and only for me for the very first time. The first thing I noticed when I woke up from anesthesia was the thirst. It was a dry scratching sensation in the back of my throat that felt like I had swallowed sand. The second thing I noticed was the silence. I blinked my eyes open, fighting the heavy drugged feeling in my limbs. The recovery room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of monitors. I turned my head to the left, instinctively looking for the visitor's chair. In my mind, I had played out a fantasy where my mother would be sitting there. Maybe she would be looking at her phone, maybe she would look annoyed, but she would be there. I imagined she would say something like, "Finally you are awake. Do you know how late it is?" But the chair was empty. It was perfectly pushed in against the wall, the vinyl seat cold and untouched. I spent 3 days in that hospital room, 72 hours, 4,320 minutes, and in all that time the door never opened for a visitor. Nurses came in to check my vitals. The surgeon stopped by to tell me the operation was successful and that I had lost a lot of blood but would recover. A kind orderly brought me lukewarm broth and green Jell-O, but my phone, which sat on the bedside table, remained silent. No calls, no texts, no voicemails asking if I was alive. Day one, I made excuses for them. I told myself they were probably exhausted from the concert. Maybe they had slept in late. Maybe they assumed I was still sleeping and didn't want to disturb me. Day two, the excuses started to wear thin. I lay there staring at the white ceiling tiles, counting the little holes until my eyes watered. I thought about the logistics of my life. I called Elena, the nanny from the agency, 3 times a day. She was wonderful. She sent me videos of Noah and Mia playing in the park, eating macaroni and cheese and reading bedtime stories. A stranger I was paying $150 an hour was doing the job my mother should have done for love. By the morning of day 3, the physical pain of the surgery was becoming manageable, but the emotional reality was setting in like a heavy fog. I decided to check Facebook. It was a masochistic impulse, I know, but I needed to see it. I needed to see what was so important that it was worth abandoning a daughter in critical condition. I opened the app, and there it was, right at the top of my feed, a photo posted by my mother, Linda. It was a selfie taken in a luxury stadium box. The lighting was perfect, capturing the glowing stage in the background. My mother was holding a glass of champagne, her smile wide and tight, showing off the veneers I had paid for last Christmas. Next to her was Tiffany, wearing a sequined outfit that cost more than my car payment, looking radiant and carefree. The caption read, "Best night of my life with my favorite girl. So proud of you, Tiff. We deserve this joy. Hashtag blessed. Hashtag mother-daughter goals. Hashtag Eras Tour." I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered over the words, favorite girl. There was no mention of me. No prayer request for the daughter in surgery. No generic update saying please respect our privacy while we deal with a family emergency. Just pure, unadulterated joy. They were celebrating while I was bleeding. They were drinking champagne that technically was bought with the loyalty points from my credit card, while I was sipping water through a straw alone. I didn't cry. You would think I would be devastated, but I wasn't. I felt a strange, cold clarity wash over me. It started in my chest and spread to my fingertips. It was the death of hope. For 34 years, I had held on to the hope that if I just gave a little more, paid, a little more, fixed one more problem, they would love me. But looking at that photo, I realized the truth. They didn't love me. They consumed me. I was a resource to them, like a battery or a bank account. And you do not visit a broken battery in the hospital. You just wait for it to recharge, or you replace it. I set the phone down on the rolling table. I took a deep breath, wincing slightly as my stitches pulled. Then I picked the phone up again. I wasn't calling my mother. I wasn't calling my father. I opened my contacts and dialed the number for the customer service line of my bank. "Welcome to Chase Private Client Services," the automated voice said. I navigated through the menus until I got a live representative. "Ms. Evans, how can we help you today?" the agent asked. "I need to make some immediate changes to my accounts," I said. My voice was raspy, but it didn't shake. "I have 3 authorized users on my primary platinum card: David Evans, Linda Evans, and Tiffany Evans. I want them removed. Immediately." "Certainly, ma'am. Just to confirm, this will deactivate their physical cards as well." "Yes," I said. "Deactivate them. And mark the cards as stolen just in case they try to swipe them manually." "Done," the agent said. "Is there anything else?" "Yes. I have a standing automatic transfer of $2,500 set for the first of every month to an account ending in 4567. "Cancel it." The agent paused. "Ma'am, that transfer is labeled mortgage assistance. The next payment is due to go out in 2 days. Are you sure you want to stop it?" I looked at the photo of my mother and Tiffany again. I looked at the champagne. I looked at the smile that I had bought. "I am sure," I said. "Cancel it. And block that account number from receiving any future funds from me." I hung up the phone. I felt lighter, but I wasn't done. I dialed a second number. This one belonged to Mr. Henderson, my family attorney. He was an old friend of my grandfather's, a man who had always looked at me with a mixture of kindness and pity whenever I came in to co-sign another loan for my father. "Sarah," he answered on the second ring. "I heard you were in the hospital. Is everything all right?" "I am fine, Mr. Henderson," I said. "I am waking up." "Good," he said. "What can I do for you?" "I need to revoke the medical and financial power of attorney I signed 5 years ago," I told him. "The one that names my parents as my decision-makers if I am incapacitated. Consider it done," he said, his tone shifting to pure business. "Who do you want to replace them?" I paused. I thought about the empty chair in my room. I thought about the nurse who held my hand when I was crying. I thought about the nanny sending me pictures of my children. "Draft a new one," I said. "I want to name the professional trust officer at the bank as the executor of my estate for now. And for medical decisions, leave it blank. I will trust the doctors over them." "Understood," he said softly. "Sarah, are you sure about this? This is a significant legal move. It effectively cuts them out of your life legally." I closed my eyes and pictured Noah and Mia. If I had died on that table 3 days ago, my parents would have inherited everything. My life insurance, my savings, my house. And I knew with sickening certainty that they would have spent it all on vacations and cars within 5 years, leaving my twins with nothing. "I am not just sure, Mr. Henderson," I said. "It is the only decision I have ever made that makes sense. One more thing. I want to start the process of removing my name from the deed of the house on Oak Street, my parents' house." "Sarah." "You co-signed that mortgage," he warned. "If you pull out, they will have to refinance. Given your father's credit score, they won't qualify. They could lose the house." "I know," I said. The coldness in my voice surprised even me. "But that sounds like a problem for people who aren't a nuisance." "Send the papers to my hospital room. I will sign them today." I ended the call. The room was still silent, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt clean. It felt like the calm before a storm. I lay back against the pillows and watched the sun beginning to set through the window. I knew what was coming. In about 48 hours, the first credit card would be declined. Then the mortgage payment would bounce. Then the letters would start arriving. They would scream. They would cry. They would come pounding on my door, demanding to know why I had betrayed them. Let them come, I thought. I was a surgeon of my own life now. I had cut out the rot, and for the first time in 34 years, I was going to let the wound heal properly. Coming home from the hospital is supposed to be a moment of relief, a soft landing into the arms of the people who love you. But as the medical transport van pulled up to my driveway, I felt a different kind of relief. It was the relief of a soldier returning from a war that nobody else knew was happening. The house was quiet. The front lawn, which my father usually criticized for being too long, was exactly as I had left it. But inside, everything had changed. I hobbled up the front steps, clutching my abdomen with a pillow I had stolen from the recovery room. Every bump sent a shockwave of pain through my incision, reminding me that I was physically fragile. But mentally, I had never been stronger. I punched in the code to the smart lock, the beep echoing in the crisp morning air. When I opened the door, the smell of chicken noodle soup hit me. Real soup. Not the canned stuff my mother would have heated up in the microwave while complaining about the effort. Elena, the professional nanny I had hired for my hospital bed, was standing in the kitchen. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and capable hands. She wiped her hands on a towel and rushed over to help me, not with pity, but with professional grace. "Ms. Evans," she said softly, taking my bag. "Welcome home. The twins are napping. I have prepared the guest room downstairs for you so you do not have to climb the stairs." I looked at her. I was paying her an exorbitant amount of money. The bill for the next 2 weeks would be enough to buy a used car. But in that moment, looking at the clean kitchen, the sleeping children, and the fresh sheets on the bed she had prepared, I knew it was the best investment I had ever made. I had bought peace. I had bought care. And unlike my family, Elena delivered exactly what was promised. I spent the first 24 hours sleeping. My body needed to knit itself back together. But by the second morning, the anesthesia fog had fully lifted. I sat up in bed, wincing as I adjusted the pillows. Elena brought me a tray with toast tea and my pain medication. "Do you need anything else, ma'am?" she asked. I looked at the laptop sitting on the nightstand. "Yes," I said. "I need to do some work." She looked concerned. "You should not be working, Ms. Evans. The doctor said, rest." "It is not that kind of work," I replied, opening the lid of the computer. "This is housekeeping." Once she left the room, I logged into my online banking portal. The screen illuminated my face with a blue glow. The numbers stared back at me. For years, looking at this screen had induced a panic attack. I was a high earner. I made good money as a head nurse, but at the end of every month my balance was always dangerously low. I had always told myself it was the cost of living in Chicago. I told myself it was inflation. But as I scrolled through the transaction history, the truth was spelled out in black and red. It wasn't inflation. It was Linda, David, and Tiffany. I started with the credit card. It was a secondary platinum Visa attached to my primary account. I had given it to my mother 5 years ago. At the time, she had given me a sob story about needing it for groceries because Dad's pension check was late. I told her it was for emergencies and food only. I clicked on the statement for the last 30 days. Whole Foods, $400. Okay, that could be groceries. But then I scrolled down. Sephora, $300. Nordstrom, $250. The Bliss Spa, $180. A charge for Ticketmaster that I realized with a sickening jolt was for the parking pass at the Taylor Swift concert. I felt the anger rising in my chest, hot and sharp. She had used my card to pay for parking at the event she chose over my surgery. She had bought anti-aging cream while I was lying in a hospital bed, bleeding. For years I had let this slide. I would see the charges and call her and she would gaslight me. She would say, "Oh, Sarah, do not be so stingy. I raised you. I changed your diapers. Can't a mother treat herself once in a while? You make so much money, why do you care about a few $100s?" And I would cave. I would pay the bill because I wanted to be the good daughter. I wanted to buy the approval that was never for sale. Not today. I moved my cursor to the tab labeled Authorized Users. Next to the name, Linda Evans, there was a small trash can icon. I didn't hesitate. I didn't tremble. I clicked the icon. A pop-up window appeared. Are you sure you want to remove this user? Their card will be immediately deactivated. I clicked yes. The screen refreshed. Her name was gone. Just like that. The plastic card in her purse, the one she flashed to her friends to look wealthy, was now nothing more than a useless piece of plastic. The next time she tried to buy a latte or a new lipstick, the machine would beep a loud, embarrassing rejection. I felt a rush of adrenaline. It was addictive. I moved on to the next item on my list. My father. Every month on the 15th, a scheduled transfer of $2,500 went to an account named David Personal. He called it his allowance. He told the extended family that he was managing my investments and this was his commission. The reality was much darker. My father was a man with a gambling problem he refused to admit and a series of failed business investments he refused to let go of. 10 years ago, he lost their retirement savings on a bad real estate deal. I stepped in. I started sending him money to cover the mortgage on their house and the utilities. Over time, the amount had crept up. He needed money for club dues. He needed money for gas. He needed money to keep up appearances. I remembered a conversation we had 2 months ago. I had told him I wanted to start a college fund for the twins. He had looked at me with disdain and said, "Why are you worrying about college? They are 3. Your mother and I need that money now. We sacrifice so much for you. The least you can do is support us in our golden years." Support. That was the word they used. But it wasn't support. It was a hostage situation. I clicked on the Recurring Transfers tab. There it was. $2,500 scheduled to go out in 3 days. 3 days. If I didn't stop it, that money would leave my account and disappear into the black hole of his debts. That was $2,500 that could go to my surgery bill. That could go to Elena's salary. That could go to Noah and Mia. I selected the transfer. I hit Cancel Series. The bank asked for a reason. I typed in one word, theft. It wasn't legally theft, maybe. But morally, they had stolen my future for a decade. The confirmation message appeared, "Your recurring transfer has been canceled. No further funds will be sent." I sat back against the pillows, breathing hard. My heart rate monitor, if I had been wearing one, would have been steady. This didn't feel like a panic attack. It felt like cutting off a gangrenous limb. It hurt, but I knew it was the only way to survive. But I wasn't done yet. There was one more leech attached to my veins. Tiffany, my 28-year-old sister, the influencer, the golden child who could do no wrong. I opened a new tab and logged into my car insurance provider. 3 years ago, Tiffany had leased a BMW X5. She didn't have the credit score to get insurance on her own, and the premiums were astronomical because of her 2 speeding tickets. My mother had begged me, "Just put her on your policy, Sarah. It will be cheaper. We will pay you back." They never paid me back. Not once. Every 6 months, the premium of $1,200 was deducted from my account. When I asked for the money, Tiffany would roll her eyes and say, "God, Sarah, why are you so obsessed with money? I am building my brand. Once I get a sponsorship deal, I will buy you a whole new car." She never got a sponsorship deal, but she did get a free ride on my insurance policy. I looked at the policy details. There it was. 2023 BMW X5. Driver Tiffany Evans. I remembered the phone call from the hospital. I remembered her voice in the background whining about missing the opening set. She was worried about a song while I was worried about dying. She was driving that BMW to the concert, burning gas I paid for, protected by insurance I paid for. I clicked on Manage Drivers. I selected Tiffany Evans. I selected Remove Driver and Vehicle. The system warned me, removing this vehicle may result in a lapse of coverage for the driver. This is illegal in the state of Illinois if the vehicle is being driven. Good, I thought. Let it be illegal. Let her get pulled over. Let her face the consequences of her own life for the first time. I confirmed the removal. The new premium calculated on the screen. It dropped by nearly $200 a month. I closed the laptop. The room was silent again. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the soft murmur of Elena singing to the twins downstairs. I lay there and did the mental math. Between the credit card, the allowance, and the insurance, I had just saved myself nearly $4,000 a month. That was $48,000 a year. It was enough to send the twins to private school. It was enough to max out my 401k. It was enough to take a vacation where I didn't have to pay for 3 other adults. But more than the money, I had reclaimed my dignity. I looked at my phone. It was still quiet. They didn't know yet. They were probably waking up with hangovers, scrolling through their photos of the concert, waiting for room service, or going out to a brunch they expected me to pay for later. They had no idea that the Bank of Sarah was closed. Permanently. I felt a twinge of guilt, a phantom pain where my codependency used to be. Was I being too harsh? Was I being vindictive? Then I shifted my leg and the sharp pain from my incision tore through me. I remembered the coldness of the operating room. I remembered the dial tone when my mother hung up. No, I wasn't being harsh. I was being just. I picked up the glass of water on the nightstand and took a long sip. It tasted clean. Downstairs, I heard Noah laugh. It was a bright, happy sound. "Mommy is coming, buddy," I whispered. "And Mommy is going to be richer, happier, and free." I decided then and there that I would not block their numbers on my cell phone. Not yet. I wanted to see it happen. I wanted to see the moment reality hit them. I wanted to see the text messages when the card was declined. I wanted to hear the voicemail when the transfer didn't arrive. I had been the audience for their drama my whole life. Now the roles were reversed. I was the one in the VIP box, and they were about to put on the show of a lifetime. I pulled the covers up to my chin and closed my eyes, not to sleep, but to visualize the future. A future where my hard-earned money went to the people who actually loved me. My phone buzzed once. I opened one eye. It was an email from the bank. Changes confirmed. I smiled. It was the most beautiful email I had ever received. The surgery was over. The tumor had been removed. And now the healing could truly begin. It had been exactly 7 days since the surgery. 7 days since I had been wheeled out of the operating room, stitched up and missing a part of my body, but feeling strangely whole for the first time in my life. The recovery at home had been peaceful, almost unnervingly so. My house, usually a chaotic waypoint for my family's drama, had turned into a sanctuary. Elena the nanny, I had hired in a moment of desperation, had become more of a family member in a week than my own blood relatives had been in a decade. She cooked, she cleaned, and she played with Noah and Mia, creating a bubble of laughter and safety that I had been too exhausted to provide on my own. For the first time in years, I sat on my patio drinking a cup of herbal tea, watching the twins chase butterflies in the backyard. My incisions still pulled when I moved too fast, a sharp reminder of the physical trauma I had endured, but the emotional wound was beginning to scab over. I had checked my bank account that morning. The balance hadn't dropped. There were no surprise charges from department stores. There were no overdraft fees from my father's gambling habits. It was quiet, but I knew the silence wouldn't last. I knew my family. They were like sharks. They didn't notice the water was calm until they realized there was no blood left to feed on. The disruption arrived at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. My phone, which had been sitting face down on the patio table, began to buzz aggressively. I watched it vibrate against the glass surface, the screen lighting up with a name that used to bring me joy, but now only brought a wave of exhaustion. Tiffany. I stared at the name. My younger sister. The golden child. The girl who had been at a Taylor Swift concert while I was bleeding internally. In the 7 days since my hospitalization, she hadn't called once. She hadn't texted to ask if I was alive. She hadn't asked who was watching her niece and nephew. My first instinct was to let it go to voicemail. That was the old Sarah, the one who avoided conflict. But the new Sarah, the one who had survived the operating table alone, felt a flicker of dark curiosity. I wanted to know. I wanted to know if maybe, just maybe, guilt had finally set in. I wanted to see if she was calling to apologize. I picked up the phone and swiped green. I didn't say hello. I didn't have the energy to fake politeness. Sarah, what the hell is going on? Tiffany's voice screamed through the speaker before I even brought the phone fully to my ear. I pulled the device away, wincing. There was no concern in her voice, no softness, just pure, unadulterated panic and entitlement. Background noise filtered through. The whoosh of cars passing by. The ding of a pump. She was outside. Hello to you too, Tiffany, I said, my voice low and steady. I am doing much better, thanks for asking. Recovery is slow, but I am alive. She didn't even hear me. She bulldozed right over my sarcasm. I am at the Shell station on Main Street, she shouted, her voice shrill with embarrassment. I have been standing here for 10 minutes trying to fill up the BMW. The card declined. I tried it 3 times, Sarah. 3 times. The attendant is looking at me like I am a criminal. There is a line of cars behind me honking. I took a sip of my tea. The steam warmed my face. I watched Noah trip over his own feet and giggle, getting back up immediately. That sounds stressful, I said calmly. Stressful, she screeched. It is humiliating. I tried the chip. I tried the swipe. It says, not authorized. Did you change the PIN number again without telling me? You know I have that audition today. I cannot be late because of your incompetence. Text me the new code right now so I can leave. I closed my eyes and let the words wash over me. Incompetence. That was rich coming from a 28-year-old woman who couldn't pay for her own gas. I thought about the BMW she was driving. I paid the lease. I paid the insurance. And apparently, I was expected to pay for the fuel she burned while ignoring my existence. There is no new PIN, Tiffany, I said. Then why isn't it working? She demanded. Fix it, Sarah. Call the bank. I have literally $0 in my checking account right now until my brand deal comes through next week. I need a full tank. This car takes premium, remember. The audacity was breathtaking. She wasn't asking for a favor. She was demanding a service. She truly believed that access to my wallet was her birthright. She didn't know I was home. She didn't know I had spent 3 days in a hospital bed alone. In her mind, I was just a faceless ATM that had momentarily malfunctioned. It is not working because I canceled the card, Tiffany, I said. The silence on the other end was absolute. The honking cars in the background seemed to get louder. "You... What?" she whispered, the aggression replaced by genuine confusion. "I canceled it," I repeated, keeping my tone light, as if I were discussing the weather. "I canceled the card. I removed you as an authorized user. The account is closed." "But..." "Why?" she stammered. Her brain couldn't process the information. It was like telling her the sky was green. "Sarah, stop joking. This isn't funny. I am stuck at a gas station. I have no gas. How am I supposed to get home?" I leaned back in my chair, looking up at the blue sky. It was a beautiful day. "Do you remember last week, Tiffany?" I asked. "Do you remember when I called Mom from the emergency room? Do you remember what she called me?" Tiffany made a frustrated noise. "Oh my God, are you still on about that? Sarah, get over it. We were at a concert. Mom was stressed. She didn't mean it. Do not be so petty. You are going to leave your little sister stranded because you are holding a grudge. She called me a nuisance," I said, cutting her off. My voice hardened, losing its lightness. She said I was a burden. And she was right, Tiffany. I have been thinking about it a lot while I was recovering from the surgery you didn't care about. "Sarah, please," Tiffany whined, her voice cracking. "I need gas. Just turn it back on for 5 minutes." "No," I said. "See, I realized something. Burdens are heavy. Burdens drag people down. And most importantly, burdens do not have money. I am just trying to be the person you all see me as. I am a broke, useless burden. And broke people cannot pay for premium gas for a BMW." "You are being a psycho," she yelled, the panic returning. "You cannot do this to me. I will tell Dad. I will tell Mom." "Go ahead," I said. "Tell them. Tell them the ATM is out of order. Tell them the bank is closed. And Tiffany, while you are waiting for them to come rescue you, maybe you can ask the gas station attendant for a job application. You are going to need one. Sarah, wait, do not hang." I tapped the red button. The call ended. The screaming stopped. I set the phone back down on the table, face down. My hand was shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally saying the words I had swallowed for years. I looked at the black case of the phone. I knew what was coming next. She would call Mom. Mom would call Dad. Then they would all call me. The storm was gathering on the horizon. But as I looked out at my children playing safely in the grass, protected by a fence I paid for in a house I owned, I realized I didn't care. Let them call. Let them scream. I took another sip of tea. It was still warm. Elena stepped out onto the patio, wiping her hands on her apron. "Was that family?" she asked, gently noting the tension in my shoulders. I looked at her and smiled, a genuine, real smile that reached my eyes. "No, Elena," I said. "That wasn't family. That was just a wrong number." I picked up my book and started reading, waiting for the next phone call, ready to deliver the next lesson to people who thought love was a transaction I was obligated to fund. The gas card was just the beginning. The real crash was yet to come. The sunset that evening was a bruised purple streaking across the sky in violent, beautiful slashes. I sat in my living room, the lights dimmed, watching the colors fade into darkness. My phone sat on the coffee table like a dormant bomb. I knew the explosion was coming. I had disarmed Tiffany at the gas station earlier that afternoon, but she was just the scout, the heavy artillery my parents were about to launch their assault. I knew their schedule better than I knew my own. It was the 15th of the month. In the Evans household, the 15th was sacred. It was the day the country club dues were automatically drafted from my father's account. It was the day my mother booked her bi-weekly lymphatic drainage massage at the Bliss Spa. And for the last 10 years, it was the day a notification would pop up on their phones saying, "Transfer received $2,500 from Sarah Evans." They lived for that notification. It was their dopamine hit. It was the reassurance that their lifestyle was secure and that their dutiful, quiet daughter was still playing her role as the family financier. But today the 15th had come and gone. The sun was down, the banks were closed, and the notification had never arrived. At 7:30, the first text arrived. It was from my father. "Sarah." Bank made a mistake. Transfer didn't post. Call them now. I have a tea time tomorrow morning and account shows insufficient funds. Fix it. I read the message twice. Fix it, not hello, not how is your recovery, not are the twins okay? Just a command. He assumed it was a glitch. He assumed that I, the ever-reliable Sarah, had simply made a clerical error. It didn't even cross his mind that I would intentionally stop the flow of money. In his world, gravity went down, the sun rose in the east, and Sarah paid the bills. Those were the laws of physics. I didn't reply. I took a sip of water and waited. 10 minutes later, my mother chimed in. Her text was longer, more frantic, laced with the specific brand of guilt-tripping she had perfected over 3 decades. Sarah, are you there? Your father is upset. The club just emailed him a declined payment notice. Do you know how embarrassing that is? He is the vice president of the membership committee. If they think he is broke, he will be the laughingstock of the locker room. Also, I tried to book my spa day and the system rejected my card. I told you to pay that bill. Stop playing games. We know you are home. Tiffany said you hung up on her. Stop being a brat and transfer the money. We have bills to pay. I looked at the word brat. I was a 34-year-old woman. I was a head nurse who managed a trauma unit. I was a mother of 2. I had just undergone major surgery alone, and to them I was a brat having a temper tantrum. They still didn't get it. They thought this was a negotiation. They thought I was holding out for an apology or trying to teach them a lesson that I would eventually abandon once they yelled loud enough. They couldn't conceive of a reality where I actually walked away. Their arrogance was a fortress, and they were safe inside it, believing that I would always be outside guarding the walls. I continued to stare at the phone, watching the notifications stack up. I could picture them perfectly. They were probably sitting in their living room, the living room I paid for drinking wine. I paid for working themselves into a frenzy of righteous indignation. They wouldn't get in the car. They wouldn't drive the 20 minutes to my house to check on me. That would require effort. That would require acknowledging that I was a person with a physical location, not just a voice in a cloud. It was easier to sit on the sofa and fire off angry texts. It was easier to bully me from a distance. Another text from my father. I am not playing around, Sarah. If that money is not in my account by 9 a.m. tomorrow, there will be consequences. You do not treat your parents this way. We sacrificed everything for you. We gave you life. Is this how you repay us? By humiliating us over a few $1,000s? You are being incredibly selfish. Just like at the concert. Always making it about you. The logic was dizzying. I was selfish for not paying for his golf game. I was humiliating him because he spent money he didn't have. I felt a ghost of the old shame trying to rise up. The conditioning runs deep. When you are told for 30 years that you are responsible for everyone else's happiness, it is hard to shake the feeling that you are doing something wrong when you finally stop. I felt a twinge of panic. What if they lost the house? What if Dad got kicked out of the club? What if they actually suffered? Then I looked down at my abdomen. I touched the bandage through my shirt. I remembered the silence of the hospital room. I remembered the nuisance comment. The panic evaporated. Let them suffer. They were adults. My father was 60 years old. If a 60-year-old man cannot pay for his own golf membership, perhaps he shouldn't be playing golf. Perhaps he should be working. The phone buzzed again. It was a group chat now. They had created a new group, Family Emergency. The participants were Dad, Mom Tiffany, and me. Tiffany wrote, "She canceled the gas card too. I told you guys she's having a mental breakdown. She is off her meds or something. She left me stranded. I had to ask a random guy to pay for my gas." It was so sketch. "Sarah, you are literally endangering my life." Mom wrote, "Sarah, answer us. This is not funny. You are scaring your sister, and you are disrespecting your father. I don't know what has gotten into you since that surgery, but you need to snap out of it. You are acting like a child. We have financial obligations. You promised to help us. A promise is a promise." I laughed out loud in the empty room. A dark, dry laugh. A promise is a promise. What about the promise to care for a child you brought into the world? What about the vow to be there in sickness and in health? Those promises apparently had expiration dates. But my promise to fund their country club lifestyle was supposed to be eternal. I decided to break my silence. Not to argue, not to explain, but to give them the reality check they were so desperately avoiding. I typed slowly, my thumbs hovering over the glass screen. I am not having a mental breakdown. I am having a clarity breakthrough. There is no glitch. There is no error. I canceled the transfers. I canceled the cards. I am not funding your lifestyle anymore. You called me a nuisance. You called me a burden. I am simply removing that burden from your lives. You are free now. You don't have to deal with me or my problems, and I don't have to deal with your bills. I hit send. The 3 dots appeared immediately. They were all typing at once. It looked like a chaotic dance of bubbles. Dad, you ungrateful little witch. After all we did for you, we raised you. We put a roof over your head. Mom, you are cutting us off because of a concert. Are you insane? We are your parents, you owe us. You can't just stop paying. We have a lifestyle to maintain. People will talk. Do you want to ruin our reputation, Tiffany? OMG, Sarah. Stop being dramatic. Just send the money. I need to get my nails done tomorrow for the shoot. You are ruining everything. They still didn't believe it. They thought it was a bluff. They thought if they insulted me enough, shamed me enough, I would crack. They thought I was the same Sarah who apologized when they bumped into me. My father sent a voice note. I hesitated, then pressed play. His voice filled the room, booming and angry, slurring slightly, as if he'd had a few too many scotches. Listen to me, Sarah. You think you are big and tough now. You think you can control us with money. You are nothing without us. We made you. And if you don't fix this by tomorrow, don't bother coming to Thanksgiving. Don't bother coming to Christmas. I will disown you. You hear me? I will write you out of the will. You will be dead to this family. The irony was so thick I could choke on it. Write me out of the will. What will the will of debt? The will of unpaid mortgages and maxed out credit cards. He was threatening to cut me off from an inheritance that didn't exist. He was threatening to ban me from holidays where I usually spent the entire time cooking, cleaning, and being ignored while they fawned over Tiffany. He thought he was holding a gun to my head, but he was holding a water pistol. I didn't reply to the voice note. I didn't reply to the text. I simply swiped down on the notification settings and tapped Do Not Disturb. I looked around my living room. It was mine. The sofa was mine. The TV was mine. The silence was mine. They weren't coming. They were too proud to come. Driving over here would mean admitting they needed me. It would mean standing on my porch and asking for help. And people like David and Linda Evans do not ask. They demand. And when demands don't work, they rage. They would stay in their house tonight, stewing in their entitlement, convinced that by morning I would come crawling back begging for their forgiveness, checkbook in hand. They would go to sleep angry but confident that the natural order of the universe would restore itself. They had no idea that tomorrow morning, when the sun rose, the money would still be gone. The golf club would still be declined. The spa appointment would still be canceled. I stood up, wincing slightly as my incisions stretched. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. It was empty. No angry parents storming the gates. Just quiet suburbia. I realized then that their power over me had never been physical. It had been entirely in my head. It was a prison built of guilt, and I had been holding the key the entire time. I turned off the living room light. Good night, Mom. Good night, Dad. I whispered into the darkness. I hoped they enjoyed their night, because tomorrow the real world was coming for them, and for the first time in my life, I wouldn't be standing there to shield them from the impact. I walked toward the stairs feeling a strange sense of anticipation. It wasn't fear. It was the feeling you get when you are watching a movie and the villain is finally about to walk into the trap. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Now all I had to do was wait for the snap. 3 weeks of silence is a long time when you have spent 34 years living in a hurricane. For 21 days, my phone had been quiet. The frantic texts had stopped after the first week, replaced by a sullen, heavy radio silence that felt more like a siege than a truce. I knew they were out there stewing in their own consequences, waiting for me to break. They expected the guilt to eat me alive. They expected me to show up at their doorstep with a checkbook and an apology begging to be let back into the fold. But I stayed home. I healed. The physical scar on my abdomen was turning from angry red to a dull pink. I could walk without wincing now. I could lift Noah and Mia without feeling like I was going to tear open. And for the first time in my adult life, my bank account was growing instead of hemorrhaging. I had saved nearly $3,000 in just 3 weeks. That was money that should have gone to country club dues, BMW leases, and spa treatments. Instead, it was sitting in a high-yield savings account labeled Twins College Fund. It was a Tuesday morning, raining lightly, the kind of gray Chicago day that usually makes you want to curl up with a book. I was in the kitchen with Elena, the nanny who had become my rock. We were making pancakes for the twins. The smell of vanilla and sizzling butter filled the house. It was peaceful. It was normal. It was everything I had ever wanted. And then the world shattered. It wasn't a knock. It was a bombardment. Bam, bam, bam. The front door shook in its frame. The sound echoed through the hallway, violent and demanding. It was the sound of police raiding a drug den, or firefighters trying to break down a burning door. Noah dropped his fork, his eyes going wide. Mia started to whimper. Elena looked at me, her spatula freezing in midair. "Stay here, Elena," I said, my voice calm despite the sudden spike in my heart rate. "Keep the kids in the kitchen. Turn up the cartoons." I knew who it was. I didn't need to look through the peephole. A stranger knocks. A delivery driver rings the bell. Only family tries to break your door down because they believe they own the house and everything inside it. I walked down the hallway. My steps were slow and measured. 3 weeks ago, that sound would have sent me into a panic. I would have run to open it, apologizing before I even saw who was there, terrified that I had upset them. But today I didn't run. I walked with the steady, heavy tread of a woman who owns the ground she stands on. The pounding continued. "Open the door, Sarah. I know you are in there. Open this door right now." It was my father's voice. It was deep booming and laced with the specific kind of rage that comes from a man who has never been told no in his life. I reached the door. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of rain and my own home, centering myself. Then I unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the door open. They were standing on my porch like a wet, angry hydra. My father David was in the front. His face was a mottled purple veins bulging in his neck. He was wearing his golf windbreaker, but he looked less like a sportsman and more like a barroom brawler. Beside him was my mother Linda. She was trembling, her mascara slightly smudged, clutching her designer purse like a shield. And behind them, looking bored and annoyed rather than angry, was Tiffany. She was scrolling on her phone, barely looking up, as if this confrontation was just another inconvenience in her day, like a long line at Starbucks. They didn't wait for an invitation. They didn't ask if they could come in. The moment the latch clicked, my father shoved the door wide open, forcing me to stumble back. I grabbed the hallway table to steady myself. A sharp twinge of pain shot through my healing incision, a physical reminder of why I had cut them off in the first place. "Move!" my father grunted, storming past me into the foyer. He brought the smell of damp wool and stale scotch with him, polluting the clean air of my home. My mother followed her heels, clicking aggressively on the hardwood floor. She didn't look at me. She looked around the house, scanning the walls, the furniture, the ceiling, as if checking for damage to property she believed was hers. Tiffany trailed in last. She didn't wipe her feet. She tracked mud onto the rug I had just vacuumed yesterday. She looked at me, rolled her eyes, and sighed. "God, it is freezing out there, Sarah. Why did you make us wait?" I stood there holding the door handle, watching them invade my sanctuary. It was breathtaking. The sheer audacity of it. I hadn't seen them in nearly a month. I had undergone major surgery. I had almost died. and not one of them looked at my face. Not one of them asked, "How are you?" Not one of them said, "We were worried." To them, I wasn't a person. I was a vending machine that had eaten their dollar, and they were here to shake me until I dispensed their product. I closed the door, slowly shutting out the rain. I turned to face them. They had already made themselves at home. My father was pacing the living room, his hands on his hips. My mother was inspecting a stack of mail on the console table. Tiffany had flopped onto the sofa, putting her muddy boots up on the coffee table. "Get your feet off the table, Tiffany," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a razor. Tiffany looked up, startled. She laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Excuse me, since when do you care about furniture?" "Since I paid for it," I said. "Down, now." She glared at me, but slowly lowered her feet. My father stopped pacing. He turned to me, his eyes narrowing. He looked at me with a mixture of disbelief and fury. He looked like a king looking at a rebellious peasant. So he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "The Queen of Sheba finally decides to grace us with her presence. Do you have any idea what you have done, Sarah? Do you have any idea the hell you have caused us for the last 3 weeks?" I looked at him. I really looked at him. I saw the bags under his eyes. I saw the fraying cuffs of his shirt. I saw a small, frightened man hiding inside a bully's costume. "I have been recovering from surgery, Dad," I said. "You know the surgery you left me to die during." "Don't be dramatic," my mother snapped, turning away from the mail. "You are fine. Look at you. You are standing. You are walking. You always exaggerate everything to make us look bad." She walked over to me, getting into my personal space. She smelled of expensive perfume and desperation. "We need to talk about the bank, Sarah," she hissed. "There has been a mistake. A very big, very embarrassing mistake. Your father went to the club 3 days ago. He tried to order lunch for his foursome. The card was declined. Declined, Sarah. In front of Judge Miller and Dr. Evans. Do you know what that felt like?" I felt a ghost of a smile touching my lips. I could imagine it perfectly. The waiter returning the card, the hush falling over the table, my father's blustering excuses. "It must have been terrible," I said flatly. "It was humiliating," my father roared, stepping closer. "I had to write a check, like it was 1990. And then yesterday I get a letter from the membership committee saying my dues are in arrears. They are threatening to suspend my privileges. Mine. I am the vice president." He pointed a finger in my face. It shook with rage. "You need to fix this. Today. Right now. You are going to call the bank, you are going to apologize, and you are going to wire the funds plus a little extra for the emotional distress you have caused your mother." I looked at his finger. I remembered holding that hand when I was a little girl. I remembered looking up at him and thinking he was a superhero. It was tragic, really, how time reveals the truth. He wasn't a hero. He was just a leech in a polo shirt. "And what about you, Tiffany?" I asked, looking past him to my sister. "What is your crisis?" Tiffany sat up, crossing her arms. "You know what it is. My car insurance. I got a notice that the policy was canceled. I can't drive the X5. I have been taking Uber everywhere. It is costing me a fortune. And Mom's card doesn't work at Sephora anymore. We look like paupers, Sarah. It is disgusting." They all stood there staring at me, 3 pairs of eyes waiting for me to crack, waiting for me to crumble under the weight of their disapproval. This was the script we had followed my entire life. They yelled, I cried, I paid. It was a perfect ecosystem of abuse. But they had forgotten one thing. They had forgotten that pain changes people. They had forgotten that when you cut someone open and stitch them back together, the scar tissue is stronger than the original skin. I walked past my father and sat down in the armchair. I didn't offer them a seat. I didn't offer them water. I sat like a judge on a bench. "I am not calling the bank," I said. The room went silent. It was a stunned silence. "What did you say?" my mother whispered. I said, "I am not calling the bank," I repeated, enunciating every word. "And I am not fixing the insurance. And I am not paying the club dues. My father's face went from purple to a dangerous shade of white. He laughed a short barking sound. "You think this is a game? You think you can just cut us off? Sarah, look at this house. Look at that car in the driveway. Who do you think you are? You are nothing without this family. We gave you credibility. We gave you a purpose." "No," I said, leaning forward. "You gave me a bill. For 34 years, you gave me a bill for existing. And I paid it. I paid it with my money, my time, and my self-respect. But 3 weeks ago, when I was lying on that gurney, I realized something. The bill is paid in full. I don't owe you anything anymore." My mother let out a sob, a theatrical practice sob. "Oh, David, look at her. She is sick. The anesthesia must have damaged her brain. She doesn't know what she is saying. Our sweet Sarah would never be this cruel." "Stop it, Mom," I said sharply. "Stop the act. There is no audience here. It is just us." I stood up again, ignoring the ache in my side. "You came here because you are broke. You came here because the tap ran dry. You didn't come to see me. You came to see the wallet. Well, the wallet is closed." My father stepped forward, his fists clenched. He looked big. He looked threatening. For a second, a flicker of childhood fear rose in my throat, but then I heard footsteps behind me. Elena was standing in the hallway entrance. She wasn't big, but she was holding her phone up, the camera lens pointed directly at my father. "I have already dialed 911, Elena said calmly. Her voice was steady, professional. "If you take one more step toward Ms. Evans, I will press send. And I have been recording this entire interaction for the last 5 minutes. My father froze. He looked at Elena, then back at me. He saw the resolve in my eyes. He saw the camera. The bully withered. You would call the police on your own father," he stammered. "If you don't get out of my house," "Yes," I said. "You have 5 minutes," I told them. 5 minutes to get off my property, or the police can escort you off. "And Dad," I added as he turned to look at me with hate in his eyes. "Don't worry about the country club. You won't be a member much longer anyway, because I am selling the house you are living in." The silence that followed that statement wasn't stunned. It was dead. It was the silence of a bomb that had just detonated, and the dust was starting to clear, revealing the absolute devastation I had just unleashed. The silence in the hallway was thick enough to choke on. My threat to sell the house hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. My father David stood with his mouth slightly open, his face draining of color as the reality of my words began to penetrate his rage. He looked at Elena, then at the phone in her hand, and finally back at me. He was a bully who had just realized his victim was holding a loaded weapon. But my mother Linda was a different breed of predator. Where my father used volume and intimidation, my mother used manipulation. She was a chameleon capable of changing her emotional skin in the blink of an eye to suit whatever narrative served her best. I watched her process the scene. She saw the camera. She saw my resolve. She saw that screaming wasn't working, so she recalibrated. I watched it happen in slow motion. The tension in her shoulders dropped. The sneer on her lips softened into a pout. Her eyes, which seconds ago had been cold and calculating, suddenly welled up with practiced tears. It was a performance worthy of an Academy Award, and in the past it would have worked. In the past I would have seen those tears and immediately apologized. I would have felt guilty for upsetting her. But today, looking at her transformation was like watching a snake shed its skin. It wasn't touching. It was grotesque. "Oh, Sarah!" She breathed out, her voice trembling with a sudden, sickly sweetness. She took a step toward me, reaching out a hand as if to stroke my arm. I flinched, stepping back. She stopped, looking wounded. "Sarah, honey, why are you being so aggressive?" she asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. "We didn't come here to fight. We are just worried. Look at you. You look terrible. You are so pale. Why didn't you tell us it was this bad?" I stared at her, unable to believe the words coming out of her mouth. "Why didn't I tell her? Mom!" I said, my voice flat. "I called you. I called you from the emergency room. I told you I was bleeding internally." She waved her hand dismissively as if swatting away a fly. Oh, that phone call. Sarah, you know how loud it gets at those stadiums. I couldn't hear a thing. I thought you said you had a stomach ache. If I had known it was surgery, obviously I would have left. But you are always so quiet about things. You never communicate clearly. The gaslighting was breathtaking. She was rewriting history in real time, turning her abandonment into my failure to communicate. She was blaming me for not screaming loud enough while I was dying. And honestly, she continued taking another step closer, ignoring the camera, now focusing her laser beam eyes on me. I have been so busy, Sarah. You know how stressful it is planning Tiffany's career. I have been running around like a headless chicken. I haven't had a moment to breathe. I assumed you were fine because you didn't call back. A mother worries, you know. I have been sick with worry. Sick with worry. The phrase almost made me laugh. She had been sick with worry while posting selfies drinking champagne. She had been sick with worry while getting facials and shopping at Nordstrom. But then came the pivot. The hook. The real reason for the performance. She sighed, smoothing down the front of her expensive coat. Anyway, the past is the past. We are here now. We are a family. We forgive you for the silence. But Sarah, we need to handle this administrative mess before it gets out of hand. She reached into her purse and pulled out a piece of paper. It was a letter from the bank. The bank called this morning, she said, her tone shifting from concern to a conspiratorial whisper. They said the mortgage payment was returned. It is obviously a glitch in their system, probably because you changed your card or something. But the thing is, honey, they charged a late fee. $75. Can you believe that? She laughed nervously, looking at me for confirmation that this was ridiculous. I need you to log in right now and fix it, she said, holding the letter out to me. And you need to make sure you pay the late fee too. We cannot have a mark on your father's credit report. We are looking at refinancing next year, and you know how delicate these things are. Just take care of it, and we can put all this ugliness behind us. We can order pizza. We can have a nice family lunch. I looked at the paper in her hand. Then I looked at her face. She was smiling an encouraging, expectant smile. She honestly thought that was all it took. A few fake tears, a little bit of revisionist history, and the offer of a pizza, and I would open the vault again. She thought I was cheap. She thought my dignity could be bought for a slice of pepperoni and a kind word. My legs suddenly felt heavy. Not from fear, but from the sheer weight of the disappointment. I walked over to the armchair and sat down, slowly grimacing as my incision pulled. I didn't take the letter from her. Instead, I reached for the manila folder I had left on the side table. It was thick with papers. I opened it and pulled out 2 documents. The first was my hospital discharge summary. The second was the bill for the surgery, the hospital stay, and the emergency nanny service. I held them out to her. What is this? She asked, frowning. Read it, I said. She took the papers, her eyes scanning them quickly. I watched her face. I saw her eyes widen as she saw the dates. Then I saw them narrow as she saw the total amount due. $42,000 for the hospital, $3,600 for the nanny. Sarah, this is a lot of money, she stammered. But you have insurance. Why are you showing me this? Look at the date, Mom, I said. Look at the timestamp on the admission form. She looked. Tuesday, 4:15 p.m. That was the exact moment you were parking the car at the stadium, I said softly. That was the moment you told me I was ruining your vibe. I leaned back in the chair, resting my hands on the armrests to stop them from shaking. You say you couldn't hear me, I continued. You say you didn't know. But I have the call log. It lasted 2 minutes, and I remember every word. I remember you telling me to take a Tylenol. I remember Dad asking if I was trying to ruin the night. And most importantly, I remember the names you called me. I paused, letting the silence stretch. Tiffany had stopped scrolling on her phone. She was looking at me now, sensing that something had shifted. You called me a nuisance, I said. The word tasted like metal in my mouth. You called me a burden. You said I was always dragging you down. Linda's face flushed. She tried to interrupt. Sarah, I was stressed. people say things they don't mean when I cut her off. No, people say exactly what they mean when they think there are no consequences. You told me the truth, Mom. For the first time in my life, you were honest with me. You don't see me as a daughter. You see me as a problem to be solved, a bill to be paid, a burden to be carried. I pointed to the hospital bill in her hand. That is what a burden looks like, Mom. A burden is waking up alone in a recovery room. A burden is paying a stranger to hold your children because your family is too busy singing along to pop songs. A burden is realizing that you are worth less to your parents than a concert ticket. I took a deep breath. The anger was gone. In its place was a cold, hard resolve. So I decided to listen to you. I decided to stop being a burden. And do you know what the heaviest part of my life was? It wasn't my children. It wasn't my job. It was you. Linda took a step back, clutching the papers to her chest. Sarah, don't say that. We love you. You love my money, I corrected her. You love the house I pay for. You love the car I lease. You love the spa treatments and the golf clubs. But you do not love me. If you loved me, you would be asking about my stitches. You would be asking if I can lift my children. Instead, you are asking about a $75 late fee. I stood up again. It took effort, but I needed to be standing for this. The bank didn't make a mistake, Mom. I canceled the transfer. I canceled the cards. I canceled the insurance. Her jaw dropped. You did this on purpose, she whispered. You knew we would get charged fees. You knew we would be embarrassed. Yes, I said. I did. Because that is the price of admission to your new reality. New reality, my father growled, stepping forward again, forgetting the camera for a second. What are you talking about? I walked over to the fireplace and picked up a framed photo. It was a picture of me, my parents and Tiffany from 10 years ago. We were smiling. I remembered that day. I had just paid off their credit card debt for the first time. They were happy because they were solvent. I was happy because I thought I had bought their love. I placed the photo face down on the mantelpiece. From this moment forward, I said, turning back to face them, this burden is closed for business. I will not pay your mortgage. I will not pay your late fees. I will not pay for your gas. I will not pay for your food. Not one single cent of my money will ever go into your accounts again. Sarah, you can't do this, my mother wailed, the fake tears turning into real panic. We have a contract. We have an understanding. You promised to take care of us. I walked to the front door and pulled it open. The rain was coming down harder now, a gray curtain against the world. I promised to be a daughter, I said. I didn't promise to be a victim. And since I am such a nuisance, I am sure you will be relieved to not have to deal with me anymore. My father looked at the open door, then at me. His face was a mask of pure hatred. He didn't see a woman reclaiming her life. He saw a servant quitting her post. You will regret this, he spat. You will come crawling back when you realize how hard it is to be alone. I smiled. It was a sad smile, but it was genuine. Dad, I said softly, I have been alone in this family for 34 years. I think I will be just fine. Get out, I whispered. They stood there for a moment, paralyzed by the absolute finality of my voice. Then slowly they started to move. My father marched out first, muttering curses under his breath. Tiffany followed, shoving her phone into her pocket, shooting me a look that was more confused than angry. My mother was the last to leave. She stopped in the doorway. She looked at me, searching for a crack in the armor, searching for the little girl who used to beg for a hug. You are making a mistake, she said, her voice trembling. We are all you have. I looked at Elena, who was standing protectively by the kitchen door. I looked at the drawings my children had taped to the fridge. I looked at the scar under my shirt. No, Mom, I said. You were all I had to lose. And now that you are gone, I have everything. I closed the door. I turned the deadbolt. Click. The sound was louder than their shouting. It was final. It was the period at the end of a very long, very painful sentence. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door and listened to their car start up and drive away. They were gone. The leeches were gone. The noise was gone. I turned around. Elena was lowering her phone. She looked at me with the tears in her eyes. "Are you okay, Ms. Evans?" she asked. I took a deep breath, inhaling the silence of my own home. "I am better than okay, Elena," I said. "I am free." But I knew this wasn't the end. My father's threat about the house still lingered. They wouldn't go quietly. They would fight for their lifestyle with the desperation of drowning rats. But they didn't know about the ace up my sleeve. They didn't know about the one person they feared more than poverty. I walked to the kitchen and picked up my phone. It was time to make the call I should have made years ago. "I am going to visit my grandfather," I told Elena, "and I think it is time he knows exactly how his son has been spending his money." The rain was still falling, a cold gray curtain that separated my front porch from the rest of the world. I had my hand on the door ready to close it, ready to lock them out of my life forever. But desperation makes people do ugly, unpredictable things, and my sister Tiffany was nothing if not desperate. I saw the shift in her eyes before she moved. It was a feral look, the kind you see in a trapped animal that realizes there is no way out. She wasn't looking at my face. She wasn't looking at the tears in her mother's eyes. She was looking past me, staring intently at the hallway table where my purse was sitting. The leather strap was hanging off the edge, and just peeking out of the top zipper was the corner of my wallet. To Tiffany, that wallet wasn't just leather and plastic. It was her lifeline. It was her gas money. It was her Sephora trips. It was the only thing standing between her and the terrifying reality of being an adult with $0 to her name. In a split second, the bored, annoyed influencer facade dropped. She didn't scream. She didn't argue. She lunged. Tiffany pushed past my father with surprising strength, her shoulder hitting my chest. A sharp, blinding bolt of pain shot through my incision site, radiating outward like fire. I gasped, stumbling backward, clutching my stomach. My feet tangled in the rug, and I barely managed to catch myself against the wall. She didn't care that she had just physically assaulted a woman recovering from surgery. She didn't even look back at me. She scrambled toward the table, her hands clawing at the purse strap. "I need that card," she shrieked, her voice cracking with hysteria. "You are not going to ruin my life, Sarah. I am taking it. It is mine. You owe me this." I watched in horror as my 28-year-old sister ripped my bag open, dumping the contents onto the hardwood floor. Lipstick, receipts, keys, and a bottle of painkillers scattered everywhere. She fell to her knees, frantic, her manicured nails scrabbling against the wood, searching for the platinum card she felt entitled to. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. This was a robbery. "Get away from there!" I yelled, the adrenaline overriding the pain in my abdomen. I pushed myself off the wall and took a step toward her. But before I could reach her, my father stepped in between us. He didn't step in to stop her. He stepped in to block me. He put a heavy hand on my shoulder and shoved me back. "Let her look. Sarah." He growled, his face inches from mine. "If you just gave us the money like a good daughter, she wouldn't have to do this. Look at what you are making her do." I stared at him, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. He was blaming me. He was blaming me for his daughter ransacking my house. In his twisted logic, my refusal to be a victim was the cause of their violence. Tiffany held up a card triumphantly. "I found it," she yelled, clutching my debit card like a trophy. "I got it." "That is enough," I screamed. The sound tore from my throat, raw and primal. I looked at Elena, who was still standing by the kitchen door, phone raised. "Call them, Elena," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "Call the police. Tell them I have intruders in my home. Tell them I have been assaulted. And tell them I want to press charges for theft and battery." Elena nodded and tapped the screen. My mother, Linda, let out a strangled cry. "Sarah, no, you cannot call the police on your sister. She is family. She is a thief," I spat back. "And you are accomplices." My father's face turned a dangerous shade of crimson. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my bicep hard enough to bruise. "Put that phone down," he roared at Elena. And you, Sarah, you listen to me. He shook me once hard. The pain in my stomach flared again, making black spots dance in my vision. You think you can call the cops on us? He bellowed. You think you are some big shot because you have a job? You think you can throw us out? Let me tell you something, little girl. You are nothing. He gestured wildly around the room, his arms sweeping across the foyer. I am your father. I gave you life. I raised you. I put clothes on your back. This house you're standing in, it is only here because I allowed it. That car in the driveway, it is practically mine. I have rights, Sarah. I have parental rights. Everything you have belongs to us because we made you. You do not get to close the door on me. I own this family. I own you. The entitlement oozed off him like toxic sludge. He genuinely believed it. He believed that by virtue of biology, he held the deed to my existence. He believed that my success was his property and my autonomy was a theft of his assets. I looked down at his hand on my arm. I looked at Tiffany, who was stuffing my cash into her pocket. I looked at my mother, who was weeping silently but doing nothing to stop them. This was it. The rock bottom. The moment where the illusion of family finally shattered completely, leaving only the sharp, jagged edges of reality. I pulled my arm out of his grip. I didn't pull away in fear. I pulled away with disgust, like wiping off something filthy. You are wrong, Dad, I said. My voice was suddenly very quiet, very cold. It was the voice of the head nurse in a trauma unit, the voice that commanded order in chaos. He blinked, taken aback by the sudden drop in volume. I walked over to the console table where the mail was still scattered. I picked up a thick envelope that I had received yesterday. It was a property tax assessment. You say you have rights, I said, holding the paper up. You say you own this house because you raised me. You say you have power. I took a step closer to him, forcing him to look me in the eye. But you are forgetting something very important, David. You are forgetting who actually signed the papers. I opened the envelope and pulled out the document. This is the deed to 124 Maple Drive, I said. This house, the house you are standing in, the house you just tried to claim credit for. I pointed to the line at the bottom. Read the name Dad. He looked down, his eyes narrowing. It says Sarah Evans, I said. Just Sarah Evans. Not David Evans. Not Linda Evans. Just me. I bought this house with my own money 5 years ago. I paid the down payment. I pay the mortgage. I pay the taxes. You didn't co-sign. You didn't contribute a dime. In fact, I remember you telling me it was a bad investment and that I should have given the money to you instead. I tossed the paper onto the table next to my pillaged purse. So no, Dad. You don't have rights here. In the eyes of the law, you are a stranger who just assaulted a homeowner. And if the police get here before you leave, they will arrest you. Tiffany froze. She looked at the debit card in her hand, then at the door. The word arrest had penetrated her hysteria. But I wasn't finished. I had one more card to play. The biggest card. The card that would dismantle their entire world. And speaking of ownership, I continued, my voice hardening. Let's talk about the house you live in. The big colonial on Oak Street. The one you love to show off to your country club friends. My father's face went slack. The rage was replaced by a flicker of genuine fear. What about it? He muttered. That is my house. I have lived there for 30 years. You have lived there, yes, I agreed. But you don't own it, do you, Dad? I saw my mother stiffen. She knew. She had always known, but she had buried the truth under layers of denial and luxury. You love to tell people you made wise investments, I said, walking toward them, herding them toward the door with nothing but the force of my words. You love to act like the patriarch. But we both know the truth. You went bankrupt in 1995. You lost everything. The bank was coming to take the house. I stopped inches from him. And who saved you, Dad? Who stepped in and bought the deed so you wouldn't be homeless? He didn't answer. He couldn't answer. The shame was choking him. It wasn't you, I said. And it wasn't me. I was only 10 years old. I looked at Tiffany, who was staring at us confused. She had never heard this story. She thought her parents were rich. She thought the money was endless. "The house you live in, Tiffany," I said, turning to her. "The house where you have your studio. The house you think you will inherit one day." I paused for effect, letting the silence stretch until it screamed. "It belongs to Grandpa Silas," I said. The name hung in the air like a thunderclap. Grandpa Silas, my father's father. The man they had forbidden me from seeing. The man they said was senile and mean. My father flinched as if I had slapped him. "Do not speak his name," he hissed. "That old man is crazy. He has nothing to do with this." "He has everything to do with this," I corrected him. "He bought the house to keep a roof over your head. He let you stay there rent-free for 20 years because he didn't want his grandchildren to be on the street. He owns the deed, Dad. He owns the land. You are just a tenant who hasn't paid rent in 2 decades. I saw the blood drain from my father's face. He knew what this meant. He knew that without my financial support to pay the utilities and the taxes, and without the shield of secrecy he had maintained, his position was incredibly fragile. "So here is the reality," I said, opening the front door wide. "You are trespassing in my house, and you are squatting in his. You own nothing. You control nothing. And right now the only thing you have is about 3 minutes before the sirens get here." Tiffany dropped the debit card. It clattered onto the wooden floor. She looked at her father, waiting for him to yell, to deny it, to tell me I was lying. But he just stood there, gray and defeated. "Get out," I said. This time I didn't have to shout. The power dynamic had shifted so completely that the air pressure in the room had changed. I wasn't the daughter anymore. I was the landlord. I was the one holding the keys. My father turned and walked out into the rain. He didn't look back. He walked like an old man, his shoulders slumped, his arrogance stripped away by the cold, hard truth. My mother followed him, sobbing quietly into her hands. Tiffany looked at me one last time. There was no anger in her eyes now, only fear. Pure, unadulterated fear of a future she wasn't equipped to handle. She scrambled past me, running to catch up with parents who could no longer protect her. I watched them get into their car. I watched them drive away. Then, and only then, did I let myself lean against the doorframe and slide down to the floor. The pain in my stomach was agonizing. My hands were shaking. But as I looked at the debit card lying on the floor, I smiled. They thought the conflict was over. They thought they could just retreat to their fortress on Oak Street and hide. But they didn't know what I was going to do next. I picked up the phone. I had one more call to make. "Elena," I said, my voice trembling but determined. "Cancel the police. I don't need them. I need you to drive me somewhere," I told her. "Where to, Ms. Evans?" she asked. I looked out at the rain, my eyes narrowing. "Take me to the nursing home," I said. "I need to talk to the real owner of the Oak Street house. I think it is time Grandpa Silas knew exactly how his tenants are treating his family." Elena backed the car out of the driveway, the tires crunching over the wet gravel. I sat in the passenger seat, clutching my abdomen, watching my house disappear in the rearview mirror. The rain was still falling in sheets, washing away the tire tracks left by my parents' car, but it couldn't wash away the ugly scene that had just unfolded in my hallway. My hands were shaking, not from fear anymore, but from the adrenaline crash. I had just declared war on the people who raised me. I had just severed the lifeline I had spent a decade maintaining. "Where to, Ms. Evans?" Elena asked softly, her eyes flicking to me with concern. "Take me to the Gables," I said. "It is the assisted living estate on the north side of town." Elena nodded and turned the car onto the main road. I leaned my head against the cool glass of the window and closed my eyes. The Gables. It was a place I hadn't visited in 7 years. Not because I didn't want to, but because I had been forbidden. For as long as I could remember, the narrative about my grandfather, Silas, had been carefully curated by my parents. "Grandpa is sick, Sarah. Grandpa is losing his mind. Grandpa gets violent if he sees new people. Grandpa hates you because you remind him of Grandma. They painted a portrait of a man who was senile, cruel, and dangerous. I remembered when I was 25, just starting my nursing career. I had bought a bouquet of flowers and driven to the Gables wanting to surprise him. I called my mother from the parking lot to ask for his room number. She had screamed at me. She told me that the last time I visited, I had caused him to have a hypertensive crisis. She said the doctors had banned me from the premises for his safety. She said, "Sarah, if you love him, you will stay away. You upset him. You are too loud, too needy. He prefers Tiffany because she is quiet." I believed her. God help me, I believed her. I was young, I was conditioned to trust them, and I was terrified of hurting the old man I remembered fondly from my childhood. So I stayed away. I sent cards that I suspected were never delivered. I sent money for his special treatments money that I handed to my father to pass along because Dad handles Silas's accounts. But lying in that hospital bed 3 weeks ago, staring at the ceiling, I started to pull at the loose threads of my family's tapestry. And the more I pulled, the more the whole thing unraveled. If Grandpa Silas was so senile, why did my father still complain about his controlling nature after phone calls? If he was broke and living off my father's charity, how was he staying in a facility that cost $10,000 a month? My father claimed he was paying for it, but my father couldn't even pay for his own golf membership without my help. The math didn't add up. And now, armed with the knowledge that my parents were liars of the highest order, I was going to find the variable that solved the equation. We pulled up to the iron gates of the Gables. It was an imposing estate, more like a country manor than a nursing home. The grounds were manicured, even in the rain. There was a guard shack. I rolled down the window. The security guard, a burly man in a raincoat, stepped out. "Name and purpose of visit?" he asked. "Sarah Evans," I said, my voice steady. "I am here to visit Silas Evans. He's my grandfather." The guard frowned and checked his clipboard. I held my breath. This was the moment of truth. If my parents had actually banned me, if there was a legal order, I would be turned away. My heart hammered against my ribs. Evans, the guard, muttered, running his finger down a list. He stopped. He looked at me, then back at the list. "I see a restricted list here for Silas Evans," he said. My stomach dropped. They had done it. They had legally blocked me. But then the guard continued. "It says no access for a David Evans and a Linda Evans without prior approval." "Are you with them?" I stared at him. The rain pelted my face, cold and shocking. "Read that again," I whispered. "David and Linda Evans are on the restricted list," he repeated. "But I do not see a Sarah. You are his granddaughter." "Yes." I breathed out a mixture of relief and fury washing over me. "Yes, I am." He opened the gate. "Go on through, ma'am. Main entrance is under the portico." As we drove up the winding driveway, the realization hit me like a physical blow. They weren't protecting Silas from me. They were protecting Silas from them. And they had lied to me about being banned so I wouldn't come here and find out the truth. They had isolated him. They had isolated me. They had built a wall of lies between the two people in the family who actually had a conscience just to keep their scheme running. I asked Elena to wait in the lobby. I needed to do this alone. The facility smelled of lavender and expensive wood polish. It was quiet, dignified. I walked to the front desk. The receptionist smiled at me. "I am looking for Silas Evans," I said. "Oh, Mr. Evans," she beamed. "He is in the solarium. He is usually beating himself at chess this time of day. He is such a charmer. Sharp as a tack, that one. Sharp as a tack." The phrase echoed in my mind as I walked down the long carpeted hallway. Not senile. Not confused. Sharp. Every step was a revelation. Every step was a betrayal. My parents had stolen 7 years of time with my grandfather. They had stolen his wisdom, his stories, his presence from my life, all to keep me thinking he was a burden I had to pay for. I reached the double doors of the solarium. I paused, my hand trembling on the handle. I looked down at my clothes. I was wearing sweatpants and a loose sweater to accommodate my surgery scars. I looked tired. I looked like a woman who had been through a war. Maybe I had. I pushed the doors open. The room was made of glass, looking out over the rainy gardens. In the center of the room, sitting in a leather wingback chair, was an old man. He was wearing a three-piece suit despite having nowhere to go. His white hair was neatly combed. A cane with a silver lion's head handle rested against his knee. He was looking down at a chessboard, his brow furrowed in concentration. He looked exactly like the man who used to bounce me on his knee. He looked powerful. I took a step forward. The floor creaked. Silas looked up. His eyes, blue and piercing, locked onto mine. There was no cloudiness of dementia. There was no confusion. There was only instant, sharp recognition. He didn't speak. He just watched me. I walked closer, my throat tight. "Grandpa," I whispered. He slowly placed the night piece down on the board. He leaned forward, squinting slightly. "Sarah," he said. His voice was gravelly, deep and steady. I nodded, tears pricking my eyes. "It is me." He sat back in his chair, studying me with the intensity of the judge he used to be. "I thought you were in Europe," he said. I froze. "Europe? Who told you I was in Europe, Grandpa?" I asked, walking until I was standing right in front of him. "Your father," Silas said. "David told me you moved to London 5 years ago. He said you were too busy with your big career to call. He said you didn't have time for family anymore. He said you changed your number and didn't want to be bothered by an old man." The breath left my lungs in a rush. London. They had invented an entire life for me. An entire continent to explain my absence. "And what did he tell you about the money?" I asked, my voice trembling. Silas frowned. "What money?" "The money for your care," I said. "The money for this place. The money for the house on Oak Street." Silas let out a short, dry laugh. "Sarah, I was a federal judge for 40 years. I made smart investments in steel and real estate. I pay for this place myself. And the house on Oak Street, I own that outright. I let David live there because he told me he was struggling. He told me he lost his job. He told me he needed a place to raise you and Tiffany. He looked at me, his eyes softening. He told me you were the one who needed money, Sarah." The room spun. I grabbed the back of the chair opposite him to steady myself. "He told me you were struggling in nursing school," Silas continued. "He told me you had credit card debt. He told me you were barely making rent. For the last 10 years, Sarah, I have been giving David $5,000 a month. He said it was for you. He said it was to help you get on your feet." I sank into the chair, the physical pain of my surgery forgotten, replaced by a nausea so violent I thought I might be sick right there on the Persian rug. It was a double con. They had played us both. They had told me Silas was broke and senile, so I would give them money to support him. And they had told Silas I was distant and broke, so he would give them money to support me. They were taking money from the granddaughter and the grandfather, keeping us apart with lies about hatred and distance, and funneling both streams of cash into their own pockets. Into country club memberships, into BMWs, into Taylor Swift tickets. I covered my mouth with my hand, a sob escaping before I could stop it. "Oh my God," I whispered. Silas leaned forward. He reached out and placed his hand over mine. His skin was paper thin, but his grip was iron strong. "It is a lie, isn't it?" he asked softly. "You are not in London. You are not broke." I looked up at him, tears streaming down my face. "I live 20 minutes away, Grandpa. I have lived here the whole time. I am a head nurse. I make 6 figures. And for the last 10 years, I've been giving Dad $2,500 a month because he told me you were broke. He told me you needed the money." Silas's face went very still. The warmth in his eyes vanished, replaced by a cold, terrifying fury. It was the face of a man who used to sentence criminals to life in prison. "He told you I was broke," Silas repeated, his voice dangerously low. "And he told me you hated me," I added. "He told me you were senile and violent. He said I wasn't allowed to visit because I upset you." Silas gripped his cane. His knuckles turned white. "I have written you a letter every month for 7 years," he said. I gave them to your mother to mail. I never got them, I whispered. He closed his eyes. He took a deep, rattling breath. They stole my granddaughter, he said. He wasn't talking to me anymore. He was talking to the universe. They stole 10 years. He opened his eyes and looked at me. He looked at my pale face. He looked at the way I was holding my stomach. Why are you holding your side, Sarah? He asked sharply. I had surgery 3 weeks ago, I said. An ovarian cyst ruptured. I almost died. And where were they? He asked. They were at a concert, I said. They told me I was a nuisance. They left me alone. Silas Evans stood up. He didn't struggle. He didn't shake. He stood up with the energy of a man 30 years younger. He walked to the window and looked out at the rain. He stood there for a long time watching the storm. When he turned back to me, the grandfather was gone. The judge was back. Sarah, he said, do you have proof of the payments you made to them? Yes, I said. I have bank statements going back 10 years. And do you have proof of the house you live in? Yes. I own it. Good, he said. He walked over to a small mahogany desk in the corner of the room. He picked up a phone. It wasn't a cell phone. It was an old-fashioned landline. He dialed a number from memory. Who are you calling? I asked. I am calling my lawyer, he said. And then I am calling the private investigator I used to use for my difficult cases. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw a smile. It wasn't a nice smile. It was a wolf's smile. You started a fire today, Sarah, he said. I can see it in your eyes. You finally stood up to them. Yes, I said. I kicked them out of my house. Well, Silas said, lifting the receiver to his ear. That was just the opening act. If David thinks he can steal from his father and abuse his daughter, he is about to learn that the statute of limitations on my patience has just expired. He paused as the line connected. Hello, Arthur, Silas said into the phone. It is Silas Evans. Yes, I know it has been a while. Dust off your briefcase, old friend. We are going to evict some tenants. And Arthur, bring the forensic accountant. We have a lot of numbers to crunch. I sat back in the leather chair listening to him give orders. The rain beat against the glass, but inside the solarium, it was warm. For the first time in my life, I wasn't fighting alone. I had found the one person my parents were truly afraid of. And looking at the steel in his eyes, I knew that my father was right to be afraid. The sleeping tiger had woken up, and he was hungry for justice. The rain lashed against the glass walls of the solarium, creating a rhythmic drumming that seemed to isolate us from the rest of the world. For the first time in 7 years, I was sitting across from the man I had loved most in my childhood, and the dam I had built to hold back the truth finally broke. It didn't start with a scream or a shout. It started with a single tear that hot and heavy rolled down my cheek, followed by a sob that I couldn't choke back. I am sorry, Grandpa, I gasped, wiping my eyes with the sleeve of my sweater. I am so sorry. I didn't know. I swear to you I didn't know. Silas didn't move to comfort me with empty platitudes. He sat still, his hands resting on the head of his cane, watching me with an intensity that made me feel seen for the first time in a decade. He waited. He gave me the space to fall apart so that I could put myself back together. I took a deep, shuddering breath and began to speak. I told him everything. I told him about the day I graduated from nursing school, looking for him in the crowd, only to be told by my father that Silas had refused to come because he was ashamed I hadn't become a doctor. I told him about the Christmas cards I had written year after year, pouring my heart out, enclosing photos of the twins, only to have my mother return them to me weeks later, unopened, claiming the nursing home had sent them back because he was too agitated to read them. They told me you were losing your mind, I whispered, my voice trembling. They said you had aggressive dementia. Mom told me that the last time I visited when I was 25, I had upset you so much that you had a heart episode. She said the doctors banned me. She said if I really loved you, I would stay away and let you die in peace. I looked up at him. His face was unreadable, carved from granite, but his eyes were burning. So I stayed away. I continued, the guilt washing over me. I thought I was protecting you. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I missed you every single day. When Noah and Mia were born, I wanted to bring them here. I wanted them to know their great-grandfather. But Dad said you hated children. He said you would scream if you saw them. Silas closed his eyes for a brief moment. A muscle in his jaw jumped. It was the only sign of the rage building inside him. And the money, I said, knowing I had to expose the ugliest part of it all. They told me you had lost your fortune. They said the steel mill pension was gone, that bad investments had wiped you out. They said this facility, the Gables, cost $10,000 a month, and that they were struggling to pay it. I leaned forward, my hands clasping together in a tight knot. Dad said he was working double shifts to keep you here. Mom said they were sacrificing their retirement for you. So I stepped up. For 10 years, Grandpa, I have been paying their mortgage. I have been paying for their cars. I have been giving them an allowance. Every time I got a raise, they took it. Every time I worked overtime, they took it. They told me it was for you. They told me I was the only thing keeping you off the street. I saw the realization hit him. It wasn't shock. It was a cold mathematical calculation. He was putting the pieces of the puzzle together, fitting my side of the story with the lies he had been fed. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. There is one more thing, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I need you to understand why I am here today. I need you to understand who they really are. I opened the voice recorder app. I found the file named Emergency Call. 3 weeks ago, I was in the hospital, I explained. I was dying, Grandpa. I called them. I begged them for help. I pressed play. The sound of the recording filled the quiet solarium. It was tinny and distorted, but the voices were unmistakable. First, my desperate pain-filled pleas. Mom, I am bleeding internally. I need surgery. Then the background noise of the stadium, the cheering, the music, and then my mother's voice. You are always so dramatic. It is just a cyst. Take some Tylenol. I watched Silas's face. He didn't blink. He stared at the phone sitting on the mahogany table between us. Then my father's voice. Is she trying to ruin this night too? Tell her to figure it out. And finally the death blow. My mother's voice, sharp and cruel. You are a nuisance, Sarah. You are a burden. Call a babysitter. Do not call us again. I let the recording play until the dial tone hummed in the air. Then I pressed stop. The silence that followed was heavier than the storm outside. I waited for him to yell. I waited for him to throw his cane or sweep the chess pieces off the table. That is what David would have done. That is what a man controlled by emotion would have done. But Silas Evans was not David. He was a man who had spent 40 years on the bench listening to murderers and thieves lie to his face. He was a man who understood that true power wasn't in volume but in leverage. He slowly reached out and picked up his teacup. His hand was perfectly steady. He took a sip, placed the cup back on the saucer with a gentle clink, and then looked at me. The warmth I had seen earlier was gone. In its place was a look of terrifying, icy clarity. It was the look of a predator who has just spotted a wounded gazelle. Sarah, he said, his voice low and smooth, devoid of any tremor. You have done a very brave thing coming here. He turned his chair slightly to look out at the rain, his profile sharp against the gray light. You know, he said almost conversationally, for the last decade your father has visited me once a month. He usually comes on the 16th. He sits in that chair right there, wears a cheap suit, and tells me stories about his brilliant investments. He turned back to me, a humorless smile touching his lips. He tells me that he is a genius in the stock market. He brings me statements, forged ones I assume, now showing incredible returns. He tells me that the money he brings me is the profit from his hard work. He calls it his contribution to my comfort. Silas tapped his fingers on the armrest of his chair. 1, 2, 3. He brings me checks, Sarah, checks written from his account. He tells me Dad here is your share of the family success. And I, being a foolish old man who wanted to believe his son was finally making something of himself, I took them. I put them back into the trust. I thought he was finally standing on his own 2 feet. He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine. But now I see the circle, he said. The money didn't come from stocks. It didn't come from real estate. It came from you. Yes, I whispered. He took money from his daughter, Silas, said his voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerous. He bled you dry. He told you it was for me. Then he brought that same money to me and told me it was from him. He used your sacrifice to buy my respect, and he used my supposed poverty to buy your compliance. He let out a short, sharp breath through his nose. He played us both, Sarah. He made himself the hero to me and the victim to you. And in the process, he lived like a king on the difference. Silas reached into his inside jacket pocket and pulled out a small leather-bound notebook. He opened it to a recent page. I kept track, he murmured, running a finger down a column of numbers. Every month, David brought me $2,000. He made a big show of it. He acted like he was handing me the crown jewels. But you said you gave him $2,500. Yes, I said. Sometimes more. Plus the mortgage on the house. Plus the insurance. Silas nodded slowly. So he skimmed off the top. He took your money, gave me a fraction to keep up the charade that he was successful, and spent the rest on country clubs and cars. And he lived in my house for free. He closed the notebook with a snap. The sound echoed like a gavel striking wood. Huara bao nam kwa, he said, slipping into a thoughtful tone. So tien bo kanai la, loi nyuan do tu, de nuiong lai la tien kwachawa. So all these years, the money your father said was investment profit to support me was actually your money. Yes. I said, the tears starting to fall again. It was all me, Grandpa. Silas didn't offer me a tissue this time. He offered me something better. He offered me retribution. He stood up. He walked over to the window and looked out at the driveway where the security guard was standing in the rain. He called you a nuisance, Silas repeated softly. He called my granddaughter the woman who saved his life and his reputation a burden. He turned around. The transformation was complete. The grandfather was gone. The judge was in session. Sarah, wipe your face, he commanded. I sniffled and wiped my cheeks. You are not a victim today, he said sternly. You are the plaintiff, and I am the judge, the jury, and the executioner. He walked back to the desk and picked up the phone receiver again. He didn't look at me as he dialed, but his words were meant for me. You thought you cut them off when you stopped the credit cards, Sarah. That was a pinprick. That was a warning shot. You have no idea what real pain looks like. But David does. He knows exactly what I am capable of when someone lies in my court. He waited for the line to connect. Arthur, he said into the phone, it is Silas. Change of plans. I don't just want to evict them. I want to audit them. I want you to freeze every asset attached to the name Evans that isn't mine or Sarah's. I want to see every bank transfer every credit card statement, every single penny that has moved through David's hands in the last 10 years. He paused, listening to his lawyer on the other end. Yes, I know that is aggressive, Silas said, his voice cold as ice. But my son committed fraud. He embezzled from his daughter, and he did it while using my name. He looked at me and his eyes softened just a fraction. And Arthur draft a new will. Immediately. The entire estate, the steel mill shares, the real estate portfolio, the trust funds, everything goes to Sarah Evans and her children. David gets nothing. Not a cent. Not a stick of furniture. I want him to leave this world exactly as he entered it, naked and screaming. He hung up the phone. Silas walked over to where I was sitting. He placed a hand on my shoulder. Get up, Sarah, he said. I stood up, my legs shaky but holding. We are going for a ride, he said, where I asked. To Oak Street, he said, picking up his cane. It is time I paid my tenant a visit. You said you wanted to sell the house. Well, I think we can do better than that. I think we should go see if your father is still feeling like he has rights when the actual owner is standing in his living room. He offered me his arm. Come with me, child. Let's go show them what a real burden looks like. The rain had stopped, leaving the solarium bathed in a pale gray light. Grandpa Silas sat back in his leather chair, the phone receiver resting in its cradle. The fire that had ignited in his eyes during the call with his lawyer hadn't burned out. Instead, it had settled into a cold blue flame. He tapped his fingers on the mahogany desk, a rhythmic, contemplative sound that reminded me of a clock counting down. "We are not going to Oak Street today," he said, suddenly breaking the silence. I looked at him confused. "But Grandpa, you said you wanted to evict them. You said you wanted to show them who the owner is." "I do," he replied, his voice smooth and dangerous. "But if we go there now, it will just be a shouting match. Your father will scream. Your mother will cry. They will play the victim just like they did with you. It will be messy, Sarah. And I do not like messes. I prefer verdicts." He stood up and walked over to the chessboard. He picked up the white king and turned it over in his fingers. "We are going to set a trap," he said. "A proper legal trap. I want to see exactly how far they are willing to go. I want to see if there is even a shred of decency left in my son, or if he is truly the monster he appears to be." "What kind of trap?" I asked, feeling a shiver of anticipation run down my spine. "A celebration," Silas said, placing the king back on the board with a sharp click. "Next Saturday is my 85th birthday. Usually your father ignores it, or he brings me a drugstore cupcake and spends the hour checking his watch. But this year, I am going to throw a party, a legacy gala." He turned to me, a small, cunning smile playing on his lips. "I am going to have Arthur send out formal invitations tomorrow. We will hold it at the Old Country Club. You know, the one your father is currently banned from because he didn't pay his dues. I will rent the ballroom. I will hire a jazz band. I will invite the mayor, the partners from my old law firm, and all of David's so-called society friends." "I don't understand," I said. "Why would you spend money on them?" "Because, Sarah, nothing makes a rat come out of hiding faster than the smell of cheese," he explained. "The invitation will state that I am making a significant announcement regarding the future of the Evans estate." He let that sink in. The Evans estate. My parents. He continued, "will read that and think one thing. They will think I am dying. They will think I am finally stepping down and handing over control of the trust, the properties, and the millions I have in investments. They will think their payday has finally arrived." He walked back to me and placed his hands on my shoulders. His grip was firm, grounding me. "But here is the hard part, Sarah. For this trap to work, you have to play a role. And it is going to be the hardest role you have ever played." "What do I have to do?" I asked. "You have to be the loser," he said softly. I blinked. "The loser. You have to go back home," Silas instructed. "And you have to be silent. Do not answer their calls. Do not text them. But most importantly, do not tell them you were here. Do not let them know we have spoken. As far as they know, I am still the senile old man rotting away in a nursing home, and you are the broke, bitter daughter sulking in her house." He looked deep into my eyes. "They need to believe they have won, Sarah. They need to believe that you are out of the picture and that I am ripe for the picking. Because when people think they have won, they get careless. They get arrogant. And that is when they show their true faces." I nodded slowly, understanding the brilliance of his plan. If I revealed our alliance now, they would go into damage control mode. They would make excuses. But if they thought I was defeated, they would walk into that party with their heads held high, ready to claim their prize. "I will send you an invitation," Silas said. "But I want you to come late. I want you to walk into that ballroom when everyone is seated. I want you to see how they treat you when they think they are the kings of the castle and you are nothing." "It is going to hurt," I whispered. "Yes, it will," he agreed. "But the payoff will be worth it. I promise you, Sarah, by the time the cake is cut, they will wish they had never been born." He went back to his desk and pulled out a notepad. He started writing a list of names. "Arthur is already freezing their assets," he murmured as he wrote. "By Saturday, their credit cards will be useless, but they won't know it is me. They will think it is just the bank being difficult or a delay in the system. They will show up to this party desperate. They will see the champagne, the lobster, the wealth, and they will be salivating. He looked up at me again. I am going to dangle the carrot, Sarah. I am going to call David tomorrow. I am going to tell him that I have been thinking about his investments and that I am so proud of how he has handled the family money. I am going to tell him that I want to make it official at the party. He is going to believe you, I said. He is so arrogant, he will believe every word. Exactly, Silas said. And that arrogance will be his downfall. He tore the page off the notepad and handed it to me. This is the contact for my personal tailor, he said. I want you to buy a dress. Not just any dress. I want you to buy something that looks like armor. Wear red. Wear something that says, "You are not afraid." Put it on my account. But Grandpa? I started to protest. Do it, he commanded. You are the heir to the Evans dynasty, Sarah. Start dressing like it. Next Saturday, you are not the nurse. You are not the doormat. You are the reckoning. I took the paper. My hand was steady now. The fear I had felt earlier was gone, replaced by a cold, hard determination. I looked at my grandfather, this man who had been a titan of the legal world, and I realized that my parents had made a fatal error. They had mistaken his silence for weakness. They had mistaken my kindness for stupidity. I will do it, I said. I will be silent. I will let them think they crushed me. Good, Silas said. Now go home. Hug those great-grandchildren of mine. Tell them Great-Grandpa Silas loves them. And Sarah, yes, Grandpa. When you walk into that party next week, keep your head up. Because when the hammer falls, I want you to be watching their eyes. I want you to see the exact moment their world ends. I walked out of the solarium and back into the lobby where Elena was waiting. The rain had cleared and a sliver of sun was breaking through the clouds. It was a sign. The storm was passing. As we drove away from the gables, I didn't look back. I looked forward. I thought about the next 7 days. It would be a week of torture knowing the truth while my parents likely spread lies about me to anyone who would listen. They would tell people I was crazy. They would tell people I abandoned them. They would preen and posture, buying new outfits on credit they didn't have, preparing to collect an inheritance that was already gone. Let them, I thought. Let them buy the gowns. Let them book the limos. Let them dream. Because the higher they climbed, the harder they would fall. And Grandpa Silas and I would be there at the bottom, waiting to catch nothing but their tears. I touched the pocket where the recording of the emergency call lay hidden. That was my weapon. Grandpa's will was the ammunition, and Saturday night would be the battlefield. I smiled as I watched the city pass by. My parents wanted a show, they wanted drama, fine. We would give them the greatest show of their lives. But they weren't the stars of this production. They were just the clowns in the opening act of their own destruction. Saturday night arrived, with a sky so clear and starry it felt like a stage set designed specifically for the drama that was about to unfold. The country club ballroom, a place my father had been banned from only days prior for non-payment, was now thrown open to us like the gates of heaven. Grandpa Silas had pulled strings-made calls and paid exorbitant fees to ensure the setting was perfect. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto the polished dance floor, and a live jazz band played soft, innocuous standards in the corner. It smelled of expensive Lily's old money and the specific metallic scent of greed. I arrived 20 minutes late just as Grandpa had instructed. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror before stepping out of the car. The red dress I had bought on Grandpa's account was unlike anything I had ever worn. It was bold, structured, and unapologetic. It wasn't the dress of a nurse or a weary mother. It was the dress of a woman who was done apologizing. I took a deep breath, visualizing the armor Grandpa told me to wear, and walked up the grand staircase. The doors to the ballroom were open, and the sound of laughter and clinking glasses drifted out. I stepped inside and paused, letting my eyes adjust to the golden light. The room was filled with the town's elite. There were judges, doctors, and business owners, people my father had spent his life trying to impress. But right in the center of the room, holding court like royalty, were my parents and Tiffany. The sight of them almost made me laugh out loud. They had gone all out. My father David was wearing a tuxedo that was slightly too tight around the waist, likely rented for the occasion. He was holding a Scotch glass in one hand and gesturing wildly with the other, his face flushed with the intoxication of perceived victory. My mother Linda was draped in a gold sequined gown that shimmered with every breath. She was wearing a diamond necklace that I recognized immediately as a loaner from a jeweler she used to frequent. She looked frantic and triumphant, all at once scanning the room to make sure everyone saw her. And then there was Tiffany. My sister was wearing a white dress that looked suspiciously bridal. She was clinging to my mother's arm, beaming at anyone who made eye contact. But what caught my attention wasn't their clothes. It was the man circling them, a photographer. They had actually hired a professional photographer to document the night they believed they would become millionaires. I watched as the photographer snapped photo after photo. My father threw his head back in a staged laugh. My mother posed with her hand on Tiffany's shoulder. They looked like a happy, wealthy, perfect family. The lie was so complete, so polished, that if I didn't know the truth, I might have believed it myself. I began to walk across the room. The click of my heels on the marble floor was lost under the music, but my presence wasn't. Heads turned. People whispered. The woman in the red dress. I kept my chin high, looking neither left nor right until I reached the center circle. My mother was the first to spot me. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face before she plastered the grin back on. She didn't move to hug me. She didn't wave. She simply angled her body slightly away, a subtle physical rejection that told me exactly where I stood. I walked right up to them. "Hello, Mother," I said, my voice calm and carrying over the music. "Hello, Dad." My father looked at me over the rim of his glass. His eyes were cold, glazed over with arrogance. He looked me up and down, noting the dress, the hair, the confidence. For a second he looked confused, but then he sneered. "You finally showed up," he grunted. "We thought you were going to sulk in your little house all night." I smiled. It was a tight, polite smile. "Grandpa Silas sent me an invitation," I said. "It would be rude not to come." My mother laughed, a high, brittle sound. "Oh, Sarah, you really just don't get it, do you? Your grandfather invited everyone. It is a formality. He is a traditionalist. Do not think for a second that this means you are back in the inner circle." She took a sip of her champagne, leaving a lipstick stain on the rim. "We know why you are here," she continued, lowering her voice so the nearby guests wouldn't hear. "You smelled the money. You realized you made a mistake cutting us off, and now that the big payout is coming, you want a piece of the pie. Well, let me tell you something, honey. You are too late." I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just looked at her. "Is that what you think?" I asked. "We know it," Tiffany chimed in. She stepped forward, shaking her hair back. She looked me up and down with a sneer that mirrored my father's. "Nice dress, Sarah," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "Did you rent it?" "It is a little loud, don't you think? Trying to get attention because you know you are irrelevant." I looked at Tiffany. I looked at the sister whose car insurance I had paid, whose gas tank I had filled, whose life I had subsidized. She looked so confident, so sure of herself. The photographer circled back to us. "Oh, a family reunion," he chirped. "Let's get a shot of the beautiful Evans women." He raised his camera. My mother immediately posed, tilting her head. Tiffany smiled her brightest influencer smile, and then my mother put her hand on my chest and gently but firmly pushed me backward. "Just us, actually," Linda said to the photographer, her voice sweet as syrup. "Sarah isn't really dressed for the photo. She's just visiting." The photographer looked awkward, lowering his lens. "Oh, I see. Okay. Just the two of you then." I stood there, pushed out of the frame of my own family. It was the physical manifestation of my entire life. I watched the flash go off, blinding and white. They beamed. I stood in the shadows. When the photographer moved away, Tiffany leaned in close to me. She smelled of expensive perfume and rot. "Don't worry, Sarah," she whispered, her hot breath against my ear. "Grandpa isn't going to leave you with nothing. I bet he leaves you the old Buick. You know, the one with the rust on the bumper. It suits you. Reliable, boring, broken." She pulled back her eyes, dancing with malice. But the house she hissed, the big house on Oak Street, and the summer cottage, and the portfolio, that is mine. Grandpa knows who the real Evans heir is. He knows who has the style to carry the family name. You are just the help, Sarah. And after tonight, when I have the deed in my hand, I am going to have you evicted from your little starter home so fast your head will spin. My father chuckled, hearing her. That is right, Tiff. We are going to clean house. He looked at me with a pity that was worse than hate. You should have just paid the club dues, Sarah, he said, shaking his head. You could have been part of this. But you got greedy. You got selfish. And now you are going to watch us eat while you starve. I looked at the three of them. I looked at the tuxedo, the sequins, the bridal white. I looked at the champagne they were drinking, champagne that was likely billed to Grandpa's account. They were so sure. They were so incredibly, delusionally sure. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. It was the calm of a person who knows the ending of the movie, while everyone else is still guessing. I hope you enjoy the party, I said softly. Oh, we will, my mother said, turning her back on me to wave at the mayor. We certainly will. I stepped back, finding a spot near a marble pillar where I could watch. I saw them working the room. I saw my father shaking hands, slapping backs, acting the part of the benevolent patriarch. I saw my mother showing off her ring. I saw Tiffany flirting with the bartender, acting like she already owned the place. They had no idea. They had no idea that the man they were waiting for, the frail old man they thought they were about to fleece, was currently backstage adjusting his tie and preparing to drop a nuclear bomb on their fantasy. I took a sip of sparkling water. I watched the bubbles rise to the top and burst. Enjoy the champagne, Dad, I thought. Enjoy the spotlight, Mom. Because in about 10 minutes the music is going to stop. And I am going to be the only one left clapping. The jazz band faded into a respectful silence as the lights in the ballroom dimmed, focusing a single bright spotlight on the stage. The murmuring of the crowd died down, replaced by the clinking of silverware and the rustle of evening gowns. I stood in the shadows near the marble pillar, my heart hammering against my ribs, watching as the curtains parted. My grandfather Silas was wheeled out to the center of the stage by his attorney Arthur. To anyone looking closely, the wheelchair was a prop, a theatrical device designed to lower the defenses of the predators in the room. He looked frail, his hands resting on a blanket over his knees, his head bowed slightly. I looked at my parents' table. They were seated in the front row, the place of honor. My father David was practically glowing. He leaned back in his chair, swirling his scotch, looking around the room with a smug possessiveness. He believed that in a few minutes, this entire building, the estate, and the millions in the trust would be legally his. My mother Linda was gripping Tiffany's hand, her eyes wide with anticipation. Tiffany was checking her makeup in her phone camera, ready to capture the moment she became an heiress. Arthur adjusted the microphone stand and lowered it to Silas's level. The room held its breath. Thank you all for coming, Silas said. His voice started out weak, tremulous. It was the voice of an old man at the end of his journey. I looked at my father. He smirked, leaning over to whisper something to my mother, probably about how much longer the old man had left. I have invited you here tonight to talk about legacy, Silas continued. For 85 years, I have built the Evans name. I have built it on steel, on law, and on the principles of justice. And as I approach the twilight of my life, I have had to make difficult decisions about who is worthy to carry that torch forward. My father sat up straighter, buttoning his tuxedo jacket. He nodded solemnly, accepting the imaginary mantle. But before I sign the papers that sit on this table, Silas said, gesturing to a leather portfolio Arthur had placed next to him, I want to tell you a story. It is a story about a family I once knew. He paused, taking a sip of water. The room was silent. This family seemed perfect, Silas said, his voice gaining a little more strength. The father was a businessman. The mother was a socialite. They lived in a beautiful house. They drove beautiful cars. They had 2 daughters. One was beautiful and demanded the world. The other was quiet and gave the world. I felt a chill run down my spine. I saw my mother shift uncomfortably in her seat. Her smile faltered slightly. 3 weeks ago, Silas continued. The quiet daughter fell ill. She was a nurse, a woman who spent her life saving others. But on a Tuesday afternoon, her body failed her. She collapsed alone. She was bleeding internally. She was dying. The silence in the room changed. It went from attentive to tense. People glanced at each other. My father stopped swirling his drink. She called her mother Silas, said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming clearer, sharper. She called the woman who gave her birth, begging for help. She didn't ask for money. She didn't ask for a kidney. She asked for someone to watch her 3-year-old children so she could go into emergency surgery without fearing for their safety. He looked directly at the front table. The spotlight seemed to reflect in his eyes, turning them into cold blue lasers. And do you know what the mother said? My mother, Linda, went pale. She gripped the tablecloth. She looked at David, panic rising in her eyes. The mother said she was busy, Silas said. He wasn't using the old man voice anymore. The tremor was gone. The weakness was gone. The judge was back. She said she was at a concert. She said her daughter was ruining her vibe. A murmur ran through the crowd. I saw the mayor's wife cover her mouth with her hand. Silas reached into his jacket pocket. He didn't pull out a reading glass. He pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen and held it up to the microphone. But why tell you the story? Silas boomed, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling, when I can let the mother speak for herself. No, my father shouted, standing up. Dad, don't. This is a mistake. Sit down, David, Silas roared. The command was so powerful, so filled with authority, that my father actually collapsed back into his chair, as if he had been shot. Silas pressed play. The sound system in the ballroom was state-of-the-art. It was designed to carry the softest notes of a jazz flute to the back of the room. Now it carried the distorted, ugly reality of my family to 300 of the town's most influential people. You are always so dramatic, Sarah. My mother's voice screeched through the speakers. It was unmistakable. Every nuance of her annoyance, every ounce of her selfishness was amplified. We have Taylor Swift tickets. I cannot leave. The crowd gasped. I saw people turning in their seats to look at the front table. My mother was shaking her head, frantically mouthing, No, that's not real. Then came the death blow. The words that had haunted me for 3 weeks. You are a nuisance. You are a burden. Do not call us again tonight. The recording ended. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum. You could hear a pin drop. Silas handed the phone to Arthur and looked down at his son and daughter-in-law. They looked like statues made of ash. My father's face was gray. My mother was crying, but not the pretty tears she used for manipulation. These were ugly, terrified tears. Tiffany was staring at the floor, wishing she could disappear. A nuisance, Silas repeated into the microphone. A burden. That is what my son and his wife call a woman who has single-handedly supported them for 10 years. He leaned forward, gripping the armrests of his wheelchair. You see, friends, for a decade, David here has been telling me he is a successful investor. He brought me checks every month to help with my care. He told me he was a dutiful son. But my investigation this week revealed a very different ledger. He picked up a stack of papers from the table. These are bank transfers, Silas announced, waving them in the air. Every single dollar David gave me came from Sarah. She paid his mortgage. She paid his car notes. She paid his club dues. And then he took the extra money she gave him, brought it to me, and claimed it was his own profit. He stole from his daughter to buy his father's respect. And he stole from his father to buy his own vanity. My father stood up again, his hands shaking. Dad, please, he begged, his voice cracking. Not here. Not in front of everyone. Let's discuss this in private. I can explain. It is a misunderstanding. There is nothing to misunderstand. Silas cut him off. You are a fraud, David. You are a liar. And worst of all, you are a bad father. Silas signaled to Arthur. The lawyer opened the leather portfolio and pulled out a document with a red seal. I, Silas Evans, being of sound mind and body, Silas declared, his voice ringing out like a judgment from on high. Hereby activate the unworthy heir clause of my estate. He looked at David. You wanted a legacy, David. Here it is. He read from the document. Due to gross misconduct, financial abuse of a vulnerable elder, and abandonment of a family member in medical distress, I am formally disinheriting David Evans, Linda Evans, and Tiffany Evans. Tiffany let out a scream. It was a sharp, piercing sound. No, you can't do that. That is my money. Silas ignored her. He continued reading. Furthermore, regarding the property at 45 Oak Street, my father's head snapped up. You have been living there as a tenant at will, Silas said. You have paid 0 rent in 20 years. You have paid 0 taxes. Sarah paid them all. As the owner of the deed, I am terminating your tenancy effective immediately. He looked at his watch. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. If you are not out by noon on the 30th day, the sheriff will remove you. And David, since I know you have no savings because you spent it all on appearances, I suggest you start looking for a very small apartment, maybe one that fits the burden. My mother collapsed onto the table, sweeping the wine glasses onto the floor with a crash. She sobbed loudly, a sound of pure devastation. But what about the trust? My father stammered, his eyes wild. The steel mill shares, the portfolio. You can't just keep it. It is millions, Dad. It is the family blood. I am not keeping it, Silas said calmly. He looked across the room. He looked past the lights, past the shocked faces of the guests, and locked eyes with me standing by the pillar in my red dress. Sarah, come here, he said. I stepped away from the pillar. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. I walked down the center aisle, the click of my heels the only sound in the room. I walked past the people who had ignored me for years. I walked past the friends who had believed my parents' lies. I reached the front of the room. I stopped at the table where my parents were sitting. I looked down at them. My father couldn't meet my eyes. My mother was a mess of running mascara. Tiffany looked at me with pure hatred, but she didn't say a word. She saw the dress. She saw the armor. She knew she had lost. I walked up the stairs to the stage. I stood next to my grandfather. He reached out and took my hand. This is the Evans legacy, Silas announced to the room. He turned to Arthur. Read the new terms. Arthur adjusted his glasses and spoke into the microphone. The entirety of the Silas Evans estate, including all real property investment portfolios and liquid assets, is hereby placed into an irrevocable generation-skipping trust. The sole beneficiaries of this trust are Noah Evans and Mia Evans. My children. My knees almost buckled. He wasn't just giving it to me. He was securing the future for my twins. He was ensuring that the cycle of abuse and financial instability stopped right here, right now. And Arthur continued, the sole trustee with full discretion over all assets and allowances is Sarah Evans. The room erupted. It wasn't polite applause. It was the sound of shock, of whispers of people realizing they had just witnessed a public execution of a social standing. Silas looked at David. Did you hear that, David? He asked. Sarah is the trustee. That means if you want a loaf of bread, if you want a tank of gas, if you want a roof over your head, you have to ask her. He smiled a cold, hard smile. You called her a nuisance. Well, now she is your landlord. You called her a burden. Now she is your banker. My father looked at me. For the first time in my life, I saw him truly look at me. He didn't see the little girl he could bully. He didn't see the ATM he could withdraw from. He saw the woman who held the keys to his survival. Sarah, he whispered, his voice trembling. Sarah, please. We are family. I leaned into the microphone. My voice was steady. It was the voice of the girl who survived the storm. Yes, Dad, I said. We are family. And as you taught me so well 3 weeks ago, sometimes family is just too much of a burden to carry. I looked at Arthur. Give them the eviction notice, I said. Arthur walked down the stairs and handed a thick envelope to my father. David took it with shaking hands. He looked old. He looked defeated. He looked exactly like what he was, a man who had gambled everything on greed and lost. Silas squeezed my hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said to the crowd, "thank you for coming. The bar is open. Please enjoy the night. We have a lot to celebrate." The band started playing again, a lively, upbeat tune that felt jarring against the devastation at the front table. But nobody was dancing. Everyone was watching as my parents and Tiffany slowly stood up. They didn't storm out. They didn't scream. They slunk out. They walked past the photographers hiding their faces. They walked out of the ballroom, out of the club, and out of the high society life they had cherished more than their own flesh and blood. I stood on the stage looking out at the room. I took a deep breath. The air smelled different up here. It didn't smell like fear anymore. It smelled like justice. I looked down at my grandfather. He winked at me. "We did it, kid," he whispered. "Yes, Grandpa," I whispered back. "We did." I looked at the exit where my family had disappeared. I felt a twinge of sadness, a mourning for what could have been. But then I thought of Noah and Mia sleeping safely in their beds. I thought of the trust fund that would pay for their college. I thought of the house that was finally truly mine. And the sadness vanished, replaced by the warm golden glow of a victory hard won. The burden was gone. And for the first time in 34 years, I was light as a feather. The ballroom doors swung shut behind my family, but the echo of their humiliation seemed to linger in the air long after they were gone. While the guests inside returned to their drinks and whispers, the real finale was happening in the lobby, away from the polite society they so desperately wanted to impress. I walked out just in time to see the breakdown. It wasn't the dignified exit of misunderstood victims. It was the ugly, chaotic implosion of people who had never been told no. Tiffany was the first to shatter. My sister, who had walked in expecting a coronation, was now sitting on a velvet bench near the coat check, hysterical. She wasn't crying because she missed her family. She was crying because she had done the math. She was screaming at Arthur, my grandfather's lawyer, who stood over her with a calm, stony expression. She yelled that she had debts, that she had a lease she couldn't break, that she couldn't possibly work a normal job because she was a brand. She actually grabbed Arthur's sleeve, begging him to release just $10,000 so she wouldn't lose her status. Arthur simply peeled her fingers off his suit jacket and informed her that any further harassment would result in a restraining order. My parents were no better. My father David was pacing in circles, his face a mask of sweaty terror. The alcohol had worn off, replaced by the sobering reality of the eviction notice in his pocket. He tried to corner me as I approached. He switched tactics again, dropping the anger for a pathetic attempt at guilt. He told me he was too old to start over. He told me that his heart couldn't take the stress of moving. He told me that I was sentencing him to death. But for the first time in my life, his words didn't land. They were just noise. I looked at him and saw a 60-year-old man who had refused to grow up, and I realized it wasn't my job to raise him anymore. My mother Linda was the quietest, but her reaction was perhaps the most satisfying. She was frantically typing on her phone, likely trying to transfer whatever meager funds they had left before the freeze took total effect. But then she stopped. She stared at her screen. Her face went white. The notification had come through. Access denied. The cards were dead. The accounts were locked. She looked up at me, and in her eyes, I saw the dawn of a terrifying new world. A world where she would have to pay her own way. Security eventually escorted them to their car. As they drove away, arguing violently with each other before they even left the parking lot, I felt a weight lift off my chest so heavy I hadn't realized I was carrying it. They were entering a world of debt downsizing and reality. I was walking back into a world of peace. 6 months have passed since that night. The seasons have changed, and so has everything else. I am writing this from the sunroom of my house, the same house I almost lost, but now own free and clear. Outside, the leaves are turning gold, and I can see Grandpa Silas teaching Noah and Mia how to play checkers on the patio. He moved in with us a month ago. He said the nursing home was too quiet, and he wanted to spend his remaining years surrounded by life, not waiting for death. He is happier than I have ever seen him. He isn't the grumpy, senile man my parents invented. He is sharp, funny, and full of stories. My life is unrecognizable. I still work as a nurse because I love it, not because I'm drowning in bills. The panic that used to wake me up at 3 in the morning is gone. When I check my bank account now, I don't hold my breath. The numbers are green. The trust fund Grandpa set up for the twins means their college is paid for. Their future is secure. But the money I save from my own paycheck, that is for us. We went to Disneyland last month. We are planning a trip to Italy next summer. I am investing in my own happiness for the first time. As for my parents and Tiffany, I heard through the grapevine that they are living in a small 2-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. My father had to get a job as a greeter at a hardware store. Tiffany is working as a waitress while trying to sell her designer clothes online to pay off her credit cards. They have tried to call me a few times. I see the blocked numbers in my log. I never pick up. I never will. If there is one thing I want you to take away from my story, it is this. Biology is the least important part of a family. Family is not about whose DNA you share. Family is about who holds your hand when you are bleeding. Family is about who shows up when it is inconvenient. My parents were willing to let me die for a concert ticket. They taught me that loyalty without reciprocity is just slavery. Do not let your concept of being a good daughter or a good son trick you into setting yourself on fire to keep others warm. You have the right to walk away. You have the right to close the wallet. You have the right to choose yourself. Thank you for listening to my journey. I hope it gives you the courage to look at the relationships in your life and ask if they are lifting you up or dragging you down. If you have ever had to break free from toxic family members, or if you are dreaming of the day, you can please drop the word freedom in the comments below. I want to see how many of us have chosen peace over guilt. And do not forget to like and subscribe for more stories about justice, resilience, and the power of saying no. Stay strong, stay safe, and remember, you are never a burden to the people who truly love you.